right, hello everyone. Welcome to Viral. Welcome to the room. My name is Qadirah, and on today's broadcast, we are talking about diaspora wars again, part 2, and is Pan-Africanism dead? So before we start the show, of course, I'm going to introduce my guest today. And today I have Rashad. Hey Rashad. I have Cortice.
Hello.
I have William. Hey, I have Chase.
Peace.
I have a lot of people today because the comments on the first video was kind of crazy. I have Gareth, I have Ashley, and I have Rhina King, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, cool. So again, last year's comments on the Diaspora Wars conversation was pretty intense. And I really wanted to have like a holistic approach to this year's conversation with everybody in the diaspora. So every ethnic group is here tonight. And I really just want to have a conversation about the issues and the problems and I don't know, things that we can do or conversations that we need to have at this moment to move forward. So before I start, because I know everybody's pretty serious, I know everybody's ready to debate. Before I start, I want to start off with like a little icebreaker. And this is pretty light. So icebreaker number 1, answer honestly. Are you someone who applauds when the plane lands?
No.
Funny.
It depends. I don't applaud.
I couldn't hear it.
It depends.
Wait, you said you couldn't hear it?
Yeah, I couldn't. It was breaking up when you were saying what you were saying.
Oh, okay. I said, are you someone who applauds when the plane lands?
Oh, yeah.
It depends on how crappy the airline is.
Yeah.
I applaud.
Yeah.
I do. I know it's kind of corny.
Depends
but
on the turbulence. You know,
Yeah. If
it was crazy. Yeah, I'm clapping.
Yeah, he gets us down there safe, I'm clapping. Like, woo.
Woo, right. If it's a smooth ride, it's kind of like, okay, you're good at this. But that's still a worthy of an applause. So okay, cool. All right, woo, that clears the air a little bit. All right, so the first question I want to ask is, do you all believe in Pan-Africanism? Now, Pan-Africanism is the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. So anyone can answer that question and take it from there. Do you believe in Pan-Africanism?
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe in it. You can go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything to say. I just wanted to say yes.
Oh, yes. I do believe in Pan-Africanism. I think Africans, they take pride in their culture. They take pride in where they're from. And so they constantly want to like unite themselves either with music, food, dance culture. However, I mean, Pan-Africanism, Africans, yes, we do have or embrace it, but I don't think it's to its full extent outside of like surface level things. Like when it comes to deeper political, like the political aspect of things, we're not that united. But when it comes to like surface things or anything that has to do with like enjoying or having a good time, yeah, we're definitely united in that aspect.
Okay. And I'm so sorry. I wanted to introduce where you all are from, so we're very clear on like where we're coming from. So you are what, Rhina?
So my name is Rhina. I am from Africa. So ethnically, I am Cameroonian and Nigerian.
Okay. And let me see, Ashley, Mrs. Malcolm, where are you from?
Hey, I'm Jamaican. Both of my parents are Jamaican, so I consider myself Jamaican.
Okay. And William, where are you from?
I was born here, but my mother's Guyanese and my father's Jamaican, so ethnically I'm Guyanese and Jamaican.
Okay. And then I'm going to go up this way. Chase, where are you from?
My name is Chase. I'm born and raised in Atlanta. Both of my parents are foundational Black Americans or American descendants of slavery, depending on how you want to call it. They're from Mississippi, so that's where my family goes back to.
Okay. And Gareth?
Yeah, I'm Afro-American. I grew up in New York City. My family's originally from North Carolina.
Okay. Patrice?
Hi, I'm Cortice. I am a 7th generation New Yorker, and on my mother's side, and then on my father's side, They are from South and North Carolina.
Okay. Rashad? Rashad, are you there? Okay. I'll skip over Rashad. I know that he is.
We're called.
Ooh, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Or maybe it's me. Is it me?
Can y'all hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, there we go.
Because breaking up. Okay. My dad's side of the family is from Sanderson, Florida, which is like, it's a small town outside of Tallahassee, that area. My mom's
Ooh, it looked like we're losing you, Rashad. So I know that he is definitely.
I have some family
definitely
from the Bahamas also,
and his family's from the United States. So I'm gonna talk for him really quick, and then me, my mother's side, 7th gen, American, Black American. My father's side is from Jamaica. So hi, Shakira in the comments. So back to the question. Sorry about that. So you said you believe in pan-Africanism, and it's the idea that we all should be unified. So you said that you believe in pan-Africanism, Raina, because of music?
No, I believe in pan-Africanism because I like the idea of being unified. In the idea of divide and conquer is very much real, and they have that divide and conquer aspect has already divided us in many different ways that is hurting the continent right now. So anything that has to do with unity or unifying us or bringing us together, I am 100% for. But the music and the aspect of food and culture was just one example of why I like the pan-Africanism aspect of things.
Okay. Does anyone not believe in pan-Africanism? Does anyone feel like it's not beneficial to the diaspora?
I would say it's not realistic, just exclusively on historical grounds, because African kingdoms and African nations helped Europeans establish the transatlantic slave trade, which was the cause of Afro people being dispersed throughout the world. And throughout the present day, those same tensions historically, they still resonate in the minds and hearts of people in African countries, as well as Afro peoples dispersed in the Western Hemisphere and elsewhere. And this is a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people to have.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
I was going to say, I agree. I agree with my brother. I think it's a great idea. I think it would be wonderful if we could just snap our fingers and everybody from the diaspora would be unified. But I think it's kind of fantasy at this point in time, So I think that as Black people around the diaspora, I'm more so of a nationalist where we have to focus on our nation, because all of us, although we have some same problems, we have different problems as well that we're trying to deal with. And to me, we can't unify as a whole until we unify within our own individual ranks or own individual tribes or ethnic groups or nations. So I agree with the brother just said.
Yeah, that's a good.
I'd agree also. I don't believe that Pan-Africanism would work, especially if we go back to one of the pioneers, somebody by the name of King Alfred Sam, if I remember right. He came over to America telling people, the Black Americans, that there's diamonds all in the rivers and such like that. One group ended up having a voyage over there. Then on the second group, it collapsed. And then nobody knew what happened to him. He took all the resources and he just went off in the mist. And to this day, people have speculations of where he's at, but they don't actually have concrete evidence now. So Pan-Africanism, for the most part, have had a shaky start even since its inception.
Okay. All right. So let's just get to the issues. Why do you think that we have issues amongst each ethnic group, Africans, Caribbeans, and Black Americans? What is the core issue in your perspective? Why do we have so many Twitter wars? Why do we have so many disrespect? And what do you think is the core issue from the time you first encountered the diaspora to now?
I would say the main thing is our differences, and a lot has to do with anger. A lot of people are angry with how things panned out back in the day. a lot of people, when you're different from someone, or you feel superior to someone, or when you're different from someone and you're angry, you tend to feel superior to them, and then it just causes a lot of like
Who feels superior?
just in general, just the idea of when someone is different from you, and you feel like you don't have anything in common, then that's where the fighting starts, as opposed
Okay.
to embracing the differences and still like, okay, like we might be different. I'm gonna embrace your difference. I might learn something from you. I might learn something from me. But I think people are just so caught up in the anger of what happened in history.
Okay.
I think
But people would say that like we look alike, right? I'm just saying what people would say. I don't necessarily agree. People would say that we look alike, and some people, like ignorant people, don't know the cultural difference, right? So what would be the reason that someone would feel superior or inferior or would feel better? I'm just taking what you just said. What exactly in your childhood experience or your experience with, because you're African, with Black Americans or Caribbeans, did you feel what you just said?
Well, I didn't necessarily point out who was superior to other. I was just speaking in general terms, because I've seen experiences where African Americans feel superior, and I've seen some experiences where I've heard experiences where Africans feel superior, which honestly, all of that thing is a facade. But that comes from insecurity as well. I would just speak from when I say insecurity is just when, and I don't want to sound offensive, but when like African American, my experience, when African Americans have had a very tough time in America, and they've, if you look at back in history, it's like there were always blockers when it comes to either getting this opportunity, again, this opportunity, racism, pretty much what I'm trying to say. And then you have people in Africa coming to the country, and 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 I guess I would say, I don't want to say having their way, but just like living life, and or it tends to rub African Americans the wrong way, because they feel like they don't feel that gratitude, they don't feel that connection with them. So it's like, who are you to come here and tell us X, Y, and Z? And so that's where the insecurity comes from, and it's no one's fault. It's just, again, lack of understanding and lack of sitting down and just accepting each other for what we are, kind of thing. I don't know if I explained it well.
Yeah.
Maybe I was picking my words. I didn't want to like offend.
It's fine. I don't think you like in this conversation. I feel like we don't need to pick our words. Just say what you feel. But thank you. Does anyone else want to share like why we have issue? Why you think we have issues?
Yeah, I wanted to share. I think it's also just a lack of education. Like, I can give you like a couple of experiences that I have had that really boil down to like lack of education. Like, I'm from the DMV area. I now live in Brooklyn, but I've also lived in South Florida. And so I went to Florida 7th to 9th grade. And in the DMV area, we don't really have a lot of Haitians. Like, the Haitian community is not big, but as y'all know, like in South Florida, it is. So when I moved down there, already the things that I was hearing from everyone was like, Haitians are dirty, they eat dog, like all these different stereotypes. Now, as someone who has never been around a Haitian community, I'm hearing all of this, and that's my first impression of what Haitians are. So that like lack of education, I'm just hearing what everyone else is saying. That's what I'm running with. Of course, I'm not like bullying anybody, but when I think of Haitian, that's automatically what I thought of, because that's what they were saying about them in Florida. Moving to New York, it's kind of different. Like, I didn't grow up here, so maybe if you grew up here, you had a different experience, but people were proud to be Haitian. There's Haitian restaurants that are like fine dining, like people go to, and like it's an experience. Like, your Haitian experience in New York, for me at least, was different than what it was in South Florida. So that kind of changed my view. I have a lot of Haitian friends now. I feel like lately a lot of Haitian celebrities have come out and been like more proud. You hear about more Haitians in pop culture and in like celebrities and stuff. So I feel like that's one situation where it's lack of education. Or another situation is like a lot of people just found out that Lala Anthony is Puerto Rican. Like, she speaks fluent Spanish, like she's Afro Latina, and a lot of people are just realizing that. And she did an interview where like, yeah, people don't associate me with being Hispanic, like they don't understand. Or I'm sorry. I watch Love and Hip Hop. Like, I'm into that. And I remember there was this one situation where Amara La Negra was saying, like, people always were thinking she was in blackface. They didn't believe that she was Dominican and that she spoke Spanish. Like, they had a whole argument on the reunion where the other cast member didn't even understand the concept of being Afro Latina. Like, he was calling her like a liar, or like he was just.
That's a good question. Not to cut you off. Are Afro Latinas part of the diaspora?
I feel like absolutely they are. Like, Black people were dropped off all over, and Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, all those Spanish-speaking countries are just another stop that they were dropped off at. Like,
okay.
I feel like they're
even if you examine the concept Afro-American, unfortunately, a lot of people, they just relegate the term Afro-American just to mean Afro peoples in the U.S. But if you really want to be technical, that term can apply to anyone of Afro descent from Canada to Chile, because the entire Western Hemisphere is the Americas. And we as Afro people in the Western Hemisphere for 5 centuries, realistically, all of us can be Afro-American, regardless of where in the Western Hemisphere we come from. And what you mentioned about Haiti and the Dominican Republic, that's one of the best examples of how the typical divide and conquer plot works so well. Because you have Haiti, the Dominican Republic, they literally share the same island. They were colonized by the same imperial empires. Their cultures are very, very similar. Like, one of the main things that separate them exclusively is just language. That's one of the only things that separates the typical Haitian from the typical Dominican. But yet they use that thing to keep themselves very polarized, and they discriminated against each other heavily based on that.
I kind of have a problem with the Afro term because there are indigenous Blacks native to this side of the world. And I feel like using solely the Afro term kind of like ignores that history. But we'll come back to that. So just going back to what you just said, you said that you felt like people called the Haitians dirty. Who called them dirty? Was it Black Americans? Was it other Caribbeans? Who was doing the
it was everyone that was Black that wasn't Haitian, honestly.
So
like, in South Florida, it's a lot of Caribbeans. I don't remember if the African population was as diverse as it is up here in New York, or like I'm from the DMV and it's like a huge West African population there. So from moving from DC to Florida, I don't recall the African population being like as it was in DC, but everyone, like everyone that was Black, like it was Black people doing it. I don't really recall, of course, white people doing it.
I live in the DMV too, and I feel like and without knowing what happened down south in Florida, I feel like Africans are closer to Caribbeans than I guess I would say than African American than they are to African Americans, and vice versa.
Okay, that's a good point, because that was the next question I was going to bring up. Okay.
Yeah, so just, I can go to a Haitian house, I can go to a Jamaican house, or I can go to any Caribbean house and see, and I would see that they're practicing the same things that we as African practice, where it comes to food, where it comes to mannerism. The only thing that separates us, or that makes us distinct from each other, is our language. But other than that, like the washing the clothes with their hands, these are just few more examples, but just the way they cook, the way they act is a lot similar. I can relate to a Caribbean person or a Haitian person, being solely fully African or acting really African. I can relate to them a lot more than African Americans. And I think
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You got it.
No, I'm just saying, and I think it's just because African Americans just have a different culture compared to how Africans are. You know what I mean? Like, African Americans are more westernized, if that makes sense. Maybe I shouldn't use that term, but African Americans are more like American, while Africans and Caribbeans are more where they're from, more African, more word.
I think it's a newer culture.
Someone in the comments said, how are Africans and Caribbeans cool when in the UK, Africans and Caribbeans are having an ethnic gang warfare? So
Well, that really sucks.
I mean, but that's a good
We're-
point because in the U.S. you just said that you feel closer, but in the UK you would think that they would feel closer to each other too, having similar cultures, but they have like a gang culture over there.
I think it's because they're the only two black group in the UK. You know, it's like over here we have three, over there they got two, so it's like one is always trying to like one up on each other. But then again, when it comes to like the surface level things, they still do kind of get together because I see a lot of collabs with UK rappers who are Africans and Caribbeans like mixing together. But then again, I feel like it's just that like me, you are the same, and we're the only ones in the European, so we're just gonna like fight against each other because it's just me and you. I don't know how to explain it, but that's just my theory.
Okay, cool. Chase, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
And then
Oh
we.
yeah, I was. Oh, somebody.
No,
go ahead.
Go
Okay.
Chase.
Okay, you know, as far as the issues go, I think to me personally, as a foundational Black American, it boils down to the lack of respect. I don't feel like we receive as Black Americans or foundational Black Americans, peoples whose ancestors goes back to slavery, the proper respect we deserve for, you know, essentially paving the way for a lot of our immigrant brothers and sisters from the islands, from Africa to come here and to benefit off what we've done. You know, even the term, one of the terms we always hearing is this kind of sarcastic, what is Black American culture? Or it's westernized culture. I think our culture has become so large and we've been so open with it. It's just American culture at this point. But people forget when you trace back that origin of whether it's hip hop, whether it's jazz. You know, we were even reading today a brother by the name of Robert Bogle created the early day catering services. But when people think of catering now, it's just so mainstream that, you know, nobody gives us credit for it. You know, so I think it's that lack of respect when we hear from our brothers and sisters who come over from the diaspora, from the Caribbean, from Africa, that really kind of rubs us the wrong way. And for the longest, I think we more than any other group have been told do the Pan-African thing. Hey, don't talk about it because if you talk about it, it's going to be seen as division. And a lot of Black Americans now at this point are just saying, nah, bro, we got to talk about it. And that's why I'm, you know, glad you're having this conversation tonight. We got to put it on Front Street so we can come to some type of solution because it is a problem. It is a problem, and it's getting worse and worse, especially in the social media era where everybody has an opinion, everybody has a camera, and you know I think that's what it boils down to: the lack of respect for me as a foundational Black American for what my ancestors did.
And even if you don't mind, even expound on that point. When it comes to respect, we even see what like slur terms and things that they have for us. You know, they say things like Qadirah. We don't have any terms for anybody else. And people take hurt or jokes that we used to crack back in the jokes, just like back in the day, like we do with everybody else. They said, well, you used to call us African booty scratchers. They used to call Southern people slow and uneducated. We just crack jokes back. That's part of the Black American culture. But a lot of people take it as being personal, as if we're just trying to be disrespectful.
But you can't blame us though.
Why not?
You can't blame if we come into your land, if we're coming to a space that you're in and we don't feel welcomed, obviously we're gonna retaliate. So
how don't you?
If it's all jokes, that's cool. Like anyone can crack jokes, but it's like don't expect us to take it as a joke every time. Like obviously we're gonna crack our own jokes by saying Akata, which really Akata came from is really like a banter. It's really not the what.
Hold on. Hold that thought right there. Hold that thought. William, you were about to say something really quick. Go ahead.
When she's done, you mind if I finish my point there?
Yeah, no, for sure, Rashad. Sorry, I was gonna go to you right after William, but you went first, so I'm just gonna let him chime in, and I'm come right back to you. And then Raina, just hold that thought. Go ahead, William.
Well, I kind of want to see this play out, but what I will say is this: I think that to answer the question of why do I think we have these issues, I think it always stems back to white supremacy, and white supremacy is a global project, and I think that the reason why we have such division within the Black diaspora is because how we have internalized white supremacy. Specifically, I think that within this diaspora wars within the Black community, it has been. I kind of put the blame on each person. So I do agree with what Chase was saying when he said that a lot of people, a lot of Black migrants in America do not have respect for foundational Black Americans. I definitely do agree with that. I've done a few studies where when Caribbean people, because I am Caribbean, not good, speak on it, and I've done heavy research on it as well. But a lot of times when Caribbean people do come to America, they downplay the effects of race, and they kind of tell Black Americans that they're lazy, or that they what's something else they say? They said that a lot of Black Americans are lazy, or that they speak about race too much, and that they just work hard so that you can benefit from the American pie, or that you can have social mobility just like anyone else. So it's essentially telling Black Americans that race does not matter in the ways that in the ways that they make it seem that it does. But the funny thing is that when you actually do the research, the longer that West Indian people or Caribbean people stay in America, and they're treated the same way by white people, then after they learn why Black Americans are speaking about race in the ways that they are, and why they act, and why their activism looks the way that it is looks the way that it does. So, but then there's so many things that go into that, because Black people in the Caribbean, they're not facing white supremacy in the same ways that Black Americans are, because Black people in the Caribbean and Black people who are born on the continent of Africa, they're living in spaces where it's the majority is Black, right? So the type of white supremacy that they're facing is more so a historical colonial white supremacy that they internalize. So like you see like a lot of colorism in West Indian / Caribbean communities. You would see a lot of colorism in African communities. So the white supremacy that Black people face outside of America is a lot different than the white supremacy that Black Americans face, because Black Americans are facing a white supremacy that's coming from a white majority. So it's a lot more violent. It's a lot more
Systemic.
yeah, it's a lot more systemic and institutional, right? So I think that we like that has to be factored in to why to why things look the way that it to why things look that the way that it does. But to go back to Chase's point, I think that we have to do a better job as West Indian, Caribbean people, and also as Africans, in respecting the path that African Americans have paid for us in this country, because they have, and they did. Um, However, Black Americans do. What I will say is that Black Americans do sometimes they internalize white supremacy as well, in the ways that they think about Africa, and the ways that they think about West Indian people as well. So I'll touch on Africans first. So a lot of times
Wait,
Black
hold on,
Americans.
hold that thought. Before you go into that, hold that thought.
Good.
I'm gonna end you at Black Americans internalize white supremacy and the way that they think about Caribbeans and Africans, right? That's what you said.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
hold that thought. Rashad, finish what you were saying about Akata and the terms, and we don't have
Okay.
terms for them.
Okay, when we crack jokes, we'll crack jokes on you, and then the next day we'll be like, "Hey, you trying to go hoop? Hey, you trying to go do that?" When y'all are crack jokes, and I use that on with air quotes. Y'all are crack jokes, and then y'all will start having heavy disdain for us. And I ain't saying all, but you'll have a group that have heavy disdain for us, that have anger towards us, and then they'll start trying to pass laws, or they'll start having these different talking points. Matter of fact, y'all will actually take our stereotypes and make jokes about it. We're not doing the whole negative stereotype of the baby, the child with the grown out stomach. We're not doing that and trying to make white folks laugh. For instance, the first the first one they say is the first Black celebrity in America was Stephen Fetchit. Stephen Fetchit is Bahamian Jamaican, if I remember right, and he was doing what his rendition of how Black Americans talk and how we act. You start looking at it from the Vine era. You had people like King Batch, Water Malone, Purple Drink. These are people who aren't Black Americans who are doing the negative stereotypes of Black Americans to get white folks to laugh. We don't do that. What we do, we'll crack jokes with you. We'll crack jokes on you, but then we'll show you love. We'll be like, "Hey, you want to come eat with us?" Some of y'all will hold that internalized hate because we crack jokes on you, because we know Black Americans crack jokes better than anyone. And y'all will take that internalized hate, and then y'all will go on these different networks and start saying, "Well, as a child, they called me an African booty scratcher." Well, like I said, I got called all the different names. People made fun of how my lips was. People made fun of how my nose was. I learned how to crack jokes back. Some of y'all don't learn that, and then some of y'all internalize that hate.
I think
Okay.
it's a
And then
cultural thing.
I,
I
I
think
also
that's a
want
cultural
to
thing.
I also want to add that I feel like the jokes that were around when we were children were used as children, and we did not tell our children call those people African booty scratchers. I think the difference between the jokes between the African people and Black American people is that you pass that akata word down as a negative slur. And I dated a Nigerian, and he confirmed that it means cotton picker. And so
That is
it's
not
so
that.
funny. It's so funny when people say, "Oh, it's not that," because every other person that in my real life who is African has confirmed that it is a slur. But then when you speak to somebody and you ask them what it means, they're like, "Oh no, it just means Black Americans from that side of the world." Well, that's still an ethnic slur that we don't pass, that we don't have any slurs that we pass down through our children. And then also, I was called an African booty scratcher in school because people didn't know what I was because of my last name. So I think that's another thing that I want to add. And then I'm gonna let you respond, Raina, but I haven't heard from Cortice. I want to know, do
Yes.
you think we have any issues? And if you think so, where are they coming from, being that you are a 7th-gen Black American?
I would like to agree with William. So I think it has to do a lot with white supremacy and just the way that we all really internalize racism. Like, it's not just that, because, for instance, I come from a very pro-Black family. Like, everything, I didn't know that there was even a real problem with like Black cultures, like different ethnic groups. I didn't know that there was a problem with us. I thought we all liked each other. I thought we were cool. Um, and and then when I got older and I went to college, I realized that there is a actual like a divide. Like, people do not like each other. They don't know. They don't get it. They don't cross over. And I struggle to understand, like, what is this about? And it just, it's a weird thing to grow up and be like, oh, love everyone, all Black people, they're all special, they're all great, but then to go somewhere and then be put in a place and like, oh, nobody really gets along, right? And it's really due to like white supremacy. Like, you got to think about it in a abstract and more broad, definite, like a broad way, because when people come over to the US, they're getting propaganda from the US that like Black people are horrible, or like African Americans specifically are like lazy, they're horrible, they're thieves, or whatever, right? And so they come and they're like, oh, this is what they're like. And then we get like certain programming and certain propaganda that like Africans are poor. They live in a desert, they live in huts and whatever, they don't do X, Y, and Z. And nobody is really understanding that like, you come over to another place, you're going to be getting messages that are not the way that you actually perceive people. Right. So I usually will go to another, if I go to another place, I'm not thinking, oh, Africans are going to be X, Y, and Z. You want to be open and you want to be like accepting of other cultures. And so it's hard for people to, I also agree with Chase, but it's hard for people to come and then they expect for people to be open, and then when those people are open, but we have perceived differences, then people expect, like, they get upset. There's no respect on either side, nobody does X, Y, and Z. It's really, i I don't know, it's
Okay.
weird.
Okay. So I'm gonna go back to Ryan. I'm gonna let you respond. I'm gonna go to the next question. So which group is the most xenophobic? So we were talking about slurs and terms, and you are disputing. You are saying akata does not mean cotton picker. Is not an ethnic slur. That is what you're saying.
I'm saying it's not. It doesn't mean a cotton picker. It's just a word to describe a cat that is away from home, and the reason, and it's not specifically used for just African Americans, because a lot of my cousins were born and raised in America. their parents, my uncles, call them Akata because they don't know the African culture like that to the core compared to somebody from Africa. So it's just a word to describe someone who is part of a group but has kind of like it's away. So a cat that has ran away from home or gone away from home. And so because African Americans are I guess epitome of that, based on history, Africans just use that to describe, oh, they're like us, but they're not quite like us because they were taken away from home. So that is how the term came about to be.
Is it an ethnic slur?
Yeah, from the Yoruba language, I believe, in Nigeria, and then Africans, the whole of Africa, just kind of like adopted the word and use it to describe African Americans or anyone who is away from home.
And
can I say something real quickly?
Sure.
I was just gonna say, you know, I dated a Nigerian as well in college, and she said it means wild one or something like that. But the problem is, like we always say, as foundational Black Americans, it's always used in a negative light. It's never look at that Akata who just became a doctor. Look at that Akata who just invented that. It's always those Akatas are drug dealers. Those Akatas are lazy. It's always so the bottom line is when we hear it, it's always in a negative stereotype. And I've heard it from adults.
It could be.
I've never heard, and let me just say this real quick, sister. I've never heard a foundational Black American who was grown call somebody an African booty scratcher. I hear that from little kids in our neighborhood. After you graduate from elementary school, that's a little kid's joke. I hear adults saying Akata regularly. I hear people from the Caribbean saying Yankee regularly. That's part of y'all culture. So that's what I would say in response to that. But I respect what the sister's saying.
And y'all got a song out there called "Stay Away from the Makatas." That
I was just saying that there's a whole song,
right?
So, stay away from.
It's like what? Whoa! How did we progress to a song? Like, what did we do?
It could be context like, hey, you like conversating with your mom, like, oh, your friend. Oh, I was hanging out with this guy. I'm really feeling him. Oh, they're like, oh, is he African or Akata? Like, you know, it's just like, is he? That just it's never used in the back in the back. Well, also, not only in the bad way. It generally just means
it seems to be used in a negative way.
That sounds like some hogwash.
And then I also want to say that I don't hear y'all use it for Caribbean ever. Y'all use it for
because Caribbeans.
No,
because away from home. Because, like I said, Caribbeans, they have. I don't know why they don't use it for Caribbeans, so I'm never going to try to open my mouth and try to.
Because they ain't Black Americans. That's why.
But I know they use it for Africans who have never set foot in Africa for sure. Because my auntie calls her kids that all the time. But it's like as a joke too.
Because they're being Americanized.
Yeah.
And who's Black Americans? They consider us Americanized. Erica, or why they call us Akata.
Okay. All right. So Ashley, you said
I like to say something really quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it goes back to what she mentioned about there's a more of a connection between people in African countries than in the Caribbean. So it would make sense why they wouldn't use that word Akata for Caribbean people. But one of the reasons how and why there's such a correlation between people from the Caribbean and people from African countries is because European powers use the same colonization tactics on people from the Caribbean and people in African countries. So you guys are the historical inheritors of the remnants of that type of colonization, and you carry it with you. So when you engage with people like us who are Afro-American in the United States, that kickback is still present. And even like the term itself, let's just assume that the term Akata isn't a negative term at all. For you to apply it to Afro-American people as, someone who's far from home. There's a reason why people were far from home. They were human trafficked, and people from African kingdoms and African nations helped to capture other African people in human trafficking. I didn't say all, but it did happen.
But can I ask you a question? Why do African Americans always pinpoint that Africans are the ones who sold them to slavery, as opposed to seeing it as, first of all, why do you believe the white man's history so much? I went to boarding school in Cameroon, and I learned that one of the tactics that they used to get Africans in the slaves in the ships, they stole them literally. They would what's the word? They would come to the chief and say, "Hey, we just need a couple of men to work for this X amount of time," and those men would never come back. I mean, there were so many different sneaky ways that they got people away. Do you think Africans were proud to?
Okay, so
I'll,
Yeah.
I would have sold
I
everybody
would
there.
like to say something as well.
Wait, hold on. Go
wait.
ahead, Rashad.
You have the women of Dahomey. They were doing it. I think it was 75% of slaves that came through the transatlantic slave trade came straight through there. Matter of fact, they had, if I remember right, they had a tree. They used to have their slaves walk around called the tree of forgetfulness, because they didn't want, when them slaves died over there, their spirits to come back and haunt them. They were brutal with their tactics, cutting jaws off, killing.
What are your sources? Where is this from?
Google.
Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston is one of the greatest.
I have never heard that in my life.
Okay. Zora Neale Hurston is one of the greatest foundational Black American authors in our history. She went down and interviewed a brother by the name of Kojo Lewis in Africatown. Africatown is in Alabama. She got this story from him. She asked him, how did you get here? He said, the women of Dahomey ran through my village, took me, and next thing I know, I was on a ship.
Right.
So that's a Black American. That's all Black. That's a whole Black story. Zora Neale Hurston. You can look up that story, and they still have their town in the Mobile, Alabama, right now called Africatown. I think they just did a Netflix special on it.
Yes.
The only reason
they did.
That's one of the sources.
My bad.
It's called. You can go to Netflix and watch Descendants, and it's about the Kuju descendants and the people that were kidnapped. Also, Radoshi. She was another woman kidnapped from what is now today Benin, that country, or Benin. And right, and my grandmother's lineage comes from Alabama, not specifically from Africatown in Alabama, but like somewhere that's not too far, Livingston. So you can find that information there. But just to answer your question, I think well, from my history that I've done, there is some type of disconnect between I can see why you would say there's disconnect between Black Americans and Africans versus Black Caribbeans and Africans, because based on my history, when we were transported from Africa, right, it was a point where we were being kidnapped, just like the Kuju story, but it wasn't at the rate as Caribbeans. So basically, Africans came into the Caribbean at a later time than we did, if that makes sense. So like we were coming to the United States, what is now the United States, in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and then it kind of trickled down and we all became Black Americans. But in the Caribbean, people were still being imported, and they have, it is said that they have a connection to Africa because they were able to keep their language and things of that sort. Over here, we were being breaded. We were like 4 generations away from Africa at that point. So I can see why there's a disconnect. But in hindsight, I would think that there would be a higher connection between Black Americans and Caribbeans because we both experienced chattel slavery in the same violent way. But I think because Black Americans experienced systemic racism after slavery, time after time again, there's that disconnect where you guys don't get it. You guys, like William just said, you guys don't understand. And I think it's funny when we speak to South Africans, for some reason, South Africans understand the Black American experience a little bit more because they experienced the apartheid. And that's the vibe I get. But I think overall, like the history, another point is that your parents come here and you guys don't study the history of Black Americans. You don't study how Black Americans laid the foundation for you all to come here in the first place. And it's automatic. Why aren't we accepted? And it's like, you don't have to be accepted. I hope that y'all know that. Like, we don't have to have open arms for everybody that walk over here, especially when you walk over here, you look like us and you spit on us. Like, you don't have to automatically be accepted. And I think that notion is kind of selfish, because if I were to walk into a Caribbean country or African country and expect to be accepted from day one, that kind of sounds a little bit like like I'm expected to be praised in a whole person's other land. It's just
If you come to Africa, even if you're not expect to be accepted, we're gonna accept your from the jump, because we see you as brothers and sisters. If you look back, and I just want to make that statement, you don't even have to expect it. You're gonna get it just because we have the hospitality. Just want to make
ma'am, that's
but
hard.
it's so weird. So then
hogwash.
why do people come here and in groups? I'm talking like in groups. Like I have an example that I'm gonna
I
throw
could
in
ask the
here.
same thing. Why is it that my mom had to come here and with open arms to see another black person and also got spitted on?
Hold up, wait.
Wait, hold on. But let me also make this clear too. The reason why your mom was able to come here in the first place was because of the 1965 Immigration Act, where we were open and we wanted Caribbeans and African people to come here at large because the government wanted poor whites to come over here in numbers. And we said, oh, hell no. If they want the Irish and the Italians to come over here, we want our African brothers and Caribbean sisters to come over here and protect us. But then what ended up happening is people came over here and wanted to assimilate to whiteness so bad that they kind of stepped on the backs of Black Americans to get to higher power.
That's a very broad statement, and then a little bit, because you never meet an African who tries to, if there's one thing about Africans, we keep our culture. We Africans, trust me, we appreciate that we were able to have the opportunity to be in America because of you guys. But I'm saying, I feel like you guys are also not shedding light on, it's like you guys, it's like, have you ever once for a second thought to ask, why do Africans act this way towards us? See, there is no smoke without a fire burning. So if someone is acting a certain way, that's because they're probably reacting to something. And I'm speaking from my mom's own stories that she told me when she came here. So why are you making fun of somebody because of the way they talk? It's just little things like that. It's like, when it happens one time, it's like, okay, fine. Twice, but it's like a continuous thing. At that point, it's like, you're already creating a barrier between each other, and then
guess what? Africans make fun of Africans and Caribbeans make fun of Southern people and Southern people accents all the time. And then, like white people make fun of Spanish people accents all the time.
People make fun of people all the time. But
there's a difference. But I just want to point out that there's a difference. There's a difference between making fun of someone, which is obviously can hurt you, right? It's a difference between making fun of someone and then carrying xenophobia through generations just because you got made fun of for your language. That is
such a broad statement. I don't think Africans react the way they do because you guys called us African booty scratcher. It's a lot deeper than that.
But I keep hearing the same stories. Like even when I asked my ex, what do you think is the main issue? He told me the same things. His father's accent got made fun of. He was called an African booty scratcher. It's the same stories from all of you guys. So I don't understand how you carry that through generations. When we wanted y'all here, we legally fought, got holes bit down by dogs to have y'all here.
Okay, and so what is the reason why Africans do the same thing to us? Isn't it also because we call you guys, we make fun of you guys too? Again, we make fun of each other. I think the way, and I get it, you're trying to support your stand on it, but at the same time, I also feel like you should also acknowledge the fact that it's not one-sided. It's never a smoke without a fire.
I think everything that we're talking about is like basically.
So who do you think, Raina? Who do you think is the most xenophobic? Which group is the most
xenophobic? I'll refrain from answering that. If you don't.
I want to answer.
Go ahead, William.
I think that we're all equally xenophobic towards each other. I think that we all play a part within the within the diaspora wars, which is something that I've DM'd you before about. That I feel that we all equally play a role in it, and then we all have work to do to stop it, right? So I want to go back to something that was said about the transatlantic slave trade. So yes, it is true that many African nations did participate within the transatlantic slave trade, and the information that was given about the Dahomey tribe is actually true, right? However, I think that what we have to, so I think we can have two conversations at once, right? We can hold African nations accountable for, we can hold certain African nations accountable for their role within the transatlantic slave trade, but we also have to have the conversation where we speak about the African nations that fought against the transatlantic slave trade and the African nations that fought against colonization, right? That's a part of history that we do not bring up. And the reason why we're not bringing up that part of history and highlighting that part of African history is because of how white supremacy has taught us to think about people who are about other black ethnic groups, and which goes back to the woman above me. I don't know her name.
Patrice.
Patrice. And what Patrice was
Portrice.
saying,
Cortice with a C.
Portrice.
C.
C
Cortice.
with a C. Not a P, but a C.
Patrice. Patrice.
C at the
No,
beginning.
the C is
at
in the
the
front.
beginning.
Portraits.
The
Portraits.
C is in the front.
Oh, Portrice. Okay. So going back to what she said, I think that a lot of the times we have to kind of like okay, so there's three main black ethnic groups, right? You have Black Americans, you have Caribbean people, and then you have continental Africans, right? Now, if you take a step back and look, you would see that the divisions that we have amongst these ethnic groups, it truly is because of white supremacy, right? And if each group tries to decolonize their mind, right, then it would be so much easier for us to come together. So, but however, that does not mean so, and that sounds very Pan-African, and it is, but it does not mean that the gripes that Black Americans have with Caribbean people or with African people is that it's not true. It is true what they're saying, right? And they have laid the foundation for us to be here, and we have to honor them for that. However, we have to also. But what I will say is this, to kind of state what African Americans have done. So I wouldn't really take the whole African booty scratcher term I wouldn't make that the focal point of my argument. But what I will say that some African Americans have done, and not at the fault of them, but at the fault of supremacy, is that they have taken up certain ideologies about Africa that you've seen within European colonization, right? So kind of dehistoricizing Africa, saying that Africa doesn't have any kind of civilizations, believing that Africa is this poor continent where, children are running around with spears, hunting this great abundance of animals that Africa has, believing that sometimes you have African Americans that also believe that in the Caribbean that all we're doing is picking coconuts and climbing up trees.
William.
That's a
Nobody
hard
thinks
one.
that.
That's a hard
Nobody
one.
thinks that, William.
Huh?
Nobody thinks that, William.
You do. I'm telling you.
Look,
So some of them do be thinking like it's just beach life. It's
I'ma
just
say
beach
this.
life and that's
Exactly.
it. Like there's a lot
Especially-
of people in the Caribbean that don't live near a beach. There's no beach in sight. Like
Okay.
And that we have no type of lights in the
Life.
Caribbean and
Yeah.
Okay, listen, I'll say this. When I was in second grade, all I saw was like videos of flies around bellies and stuff of Africa. And that's what my teachers would try to tell me, right? But I went to a kindergarten with nothing but the diaspora. And so I learned about Africa through my parents at a very young age. And so
that's you though, but like
but it was me and it was a big community of people who have. And so the only thing I just want to dispute really quick before I forget is that I do not believe that Black Americans look at Africans as some type of poor whatever, because we grew up very Pan-African. Our people made documentaries about your kingdoms, your powers, your queens, Queen Zinga, those people. We have Hidden Colors, 3 documentaries about Africa being this huge, powerful place, and we big y'all up. My mom still wear African hoops. This lady has never went to Africa. She is
because y'all. That's
so we big y'all up.
No, we showing love.
Big y'all up.
That's what
I think that was a reaction to what was going on in America, though. I
Hold
think
up.
like
Hold
they
up.
didn't feel
Hold up.
accepted by white people, and so they ran to that was that whole. It wasn't like maybe some people it was what you're saying it was, but I remember a lot of it being a reaction to what was going on in America.
They literally just told you that we had stories like Kuju, who's from Africa, so we knew about those connections through people like that.
I don't know. I mean, you also
we
started off by saying that all you saw was like flies around Africans. So
I'm saying that my teachers would try to tell me that that's how it looked. But I knew better by second grade because.
But you see, you knew better. But you see, you knew better because of your family structure and the other Black people that were around you. You have many people like your teacher, right? That when they taught Black people those things, when they kind of colonized Black people's minds like that, it stayed that way for a very long time. You have so many Black people that thought about Africa in those ways because of propaganda and miseducation. And after when they see, and then when they see the Black Panther movies, like, wait. Africa could, and then it's like the Wakandanization of Africa. Like, oh wait, now Africa could have these things, and it's like, no, Africa always had great civilizations. So you do, so like within this diaspora wars, you that's why I said that the blame is equally amongst each other. We all have work to do, and Black Americans.
Sorry, William. I'm gonna cut you off again real quick because I know that we're hitting almost the hour. But go ahead, Chase.
Oh, I was just gonna say real quick. Foundational Black Americans have always picked up the diaspora. There is not one historically Black college. Hold on. There's not one historically Black college that doesn't teach Africana studies. You have so many foundational Black Americans becoming doctorates in their masters.
Learn? Oh, we can answer that for sure.
Of course, you guys are gonna learn in the historically Black culture. Of course, you're gonna learn about your ancestors and where you're from. And you guys should be absolutely proud of that. What else are you gonna learn? Asian community.
Hold on,
right now. Hold on.
I was saying that we big up and we talk about classical African civilizations all the time. We got Dr. Yosef Ben Yuckerman. He came over here. A lot of people know about him because foundational Black Americans recording him, going to his lectures, and kept that alive. Brother by the name of Clemson Brown. Dr. Ivan Ben Sertima. Your scholars come over here and we big them up. We sell out their lectures. We always have done this. There's not a one HBCU that you can go to that they're not teaching Africana studies. So like this whole thing that we were talking down on Africa, I disagree with that.
I feel like what you just said is a little bit. I feel like it's not inclusive.
Sorry. Ashley, you didn't get it. Ashley, Gareth, and then Cortice, and then everybody else. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that for one, I feel like what you're saying is it's like a little bit classist and elitist because first of all, not everyone's going to college. So like I said, when I went to South Florida and I heard these things that people were saying about Haitians, I was in high school when this happened. So it's not a child thing. It's not a kiddie thing. I was in high school when they were saying this about Haitians, and it didn't come off as a joke. Like you were saying, oh, we crack jokes. It didn't come off as a joke. People were fighting. The Haitian community and other little communities, they were alienated. It wasn't a joke. It didn't come off as a joke. And I feel like Jamaicans and Africans are very witty people. We know how to make jokes. We can take jokes. But like I said, it was a cultural thing. Like, I'm sorry, I'm referring to things that are on the top of my head, but like Tokyo and Spice, they had a confrontation because Spice was calling Tokyo fat. And in Jamaica, she was saying there's no such thing as body shaming. Like we call people fat. Like there was a joke, like if someone has one leg, that's their nickname, one leg. Like there's no real body shaming. So it was a cultural misunderstanding when she called Tokyo fat that she was being mean, but that's like how we joke, like how y'all say y'all joke, that's how we joke. Like Spice did not, the concept of fat body shaming was not even a thing in her mind. So I feel like that joke thing is I feel like it's a cultural difference, and I feel like what you were just saying is a little bit elitist. I feel like the things that adults say when they come over is the same thing that elite Black people say about other Black Americans, that they're lazy, they don't want to work. We come over here and we make something of ourselves. Why can't y'all? Like that's things that elitist Black people say about poor Black people all the time. So I feel like I was
another divide.
I feel like it's white supremacy. At the end of the day, it's white supremacy. They have the same rhetoric, whether you're African, you're Black, all of that. They're saying the same thing about Black Americans.
Okay. I just say this 30 seconds. Brother Bill Cosby did a whole documentary that was basically on an elementary school level called Lost, Stolen, and Strayed, bigging up the African continent. This is back in the 60s. Brothers like Tariq Nasheed don't even have a high school diploma. Did the Hidden Color series, bigging up the diaspora. Is there any African nation or Caribbean nation that in your colleges, in your schools, have a whole study dedicated to Black Americans?
No, because African Americans are in America. Of course, Africans in America are going to learn about where they come from. The same way as Germans here are not going to make they'll make a documentary about Germany, but you ain't gonna see no German making documentaries about Germans in America, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying all of this to say it's true, right or wrong. I'm just answering your question. And another thing too, I've noticed that a lot of you African Americans like to say y'all, and I think.
That's our slang, by the way.
No. When I say y'all, I mean like indicating that like you are Africans, we're African Americans, we big up you guys, and you guys don't big us up. It's like, okay.
So y'all don't
I lost my
distinguish
train of
yourselves.
thought, but
Y'all don't distinguish yourselves when y'all come over here. Y'all don't say
it's just okay. What I
y'all
was
don't have
saying
y'all
is
Caribbean carnivals
you
and
guys are not
Matter of fact,
acknowledging the fact that y'all are wrong. All I'm hearing is
That's true.
it's all you guys. We don't get respect. We don't. We are able to acknowledge the fact that yes, we do have a lot of work to do. But it's like all y'all's argument is always, nah,
All right.
y'all not giving us respect.
Raina. Tell me in 30 seconds what we're wrong about.
I think there should be a point where you also have to acknowledge where African is. For me to better understand you guys, also acknowledge where you guys were wrong in, as far as, okay, yes, we were wrong in doing this, we're wrong in doing that. But I feel like all I was hearing is we don't get respect from anybody. We always big up Africans, and Africans never big us up. Like, just at where I'm over here, like, yes, we do have some work to do. We do need to unite. We do have differences, like, but I'm not getting that from you guys. It's like what I'm getting is we're all so perfect, and you guys are the one. You guys are the problem. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, cool. Gareth, who do you think is the most xenophobic, or what are your thoughts on this?
In terms of the most xenophobic, I can't say who's the most. I agree with someone that already mentioned that we're all xenophobic, but we're xenophobic in different ways. Some of us are xenophobic via self-hate. Let's say, for example, in terms of like quote unquote beauty standards, a lot of people of Afro descent, Black descent, they still imitate European beauty standards, like with the fake hair and the skin bleaching and stuff like that, which is very popular in the Caribbean countries and African countries. Skin bleaching is very, very common, and in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, they call it browning. So even within ourselves, introspectively, we have to look at how xenophobic we are, what we see in the mirror. Do we see beauty or do we see ugliness? And then a lot of times that reflects on how we view other people of the same ilk. Because if you view yourself with disgust, you're not going to respect a person who looks like you. You're going to view them with disgust also. So there's a lot of self-hate in the room. And each of us have to look, we have to look how much do we respect ourselves? How much do we actually love ourselves on an individual level, on a societal level, ethnic level, cultural level, and then to look outward to see how much we actually respect people who are like us but still different because of cultural and societal and historical circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. Xenophobic from within. Wow, that's a different point. And Cortice or Rashad, any thoughts on this question before I move on?
Yeah. I just for one, I don't know what the sister name is at the bottom left. What's your name?
Ashley.
Ashley. Yeah. When you said something about you coming over and y'all doing this and y'all doing so well, that's we gotta cut. That's really cap because of the simple fact a lot of y'all not balling out of control like y'all are putting up. Y'all faking the funk with that. A lot of y'all come over and work the same jobs we do. The only difference is y'all are basing it off of a small population that comes over here and say, well, look how good we do. And then the riffraff that y'all do have come over here, y'all don't claim them. Y'all just fall them under the category of Black. For instance, you just mentioned South Florida. It was a common thing in South Florida where when someone from who was immigrated here from the Caribbean, whether it was Jamaica, whether it was Haiti, they would commit a crime and they would get deported. They would get the fake passport and they would come right back over here and then do the crimes over again. All of that get thrown on Black society. The movie Shadows actually talked about that. They had that happen in the beginning scene. So this idea of y'all balling out of control, just doing so much better than us, it's not us being.
I didn't say that. I said that was the rhetoric. And I feel like because it's an immigrant rhetoric, not only Black people do that, Asians do that, immigrants do it in general. You come over here to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. You're coming over here to make money, to have a better life, to better the people back in the home country. That's what I meant. Like I didn't say that they did come over here balling out of control.
I'm speaking to that specific rhetoric for the most part.
Yeah, the adults will come over, and a lot of the Africans that I went to college with, I went to Howard, a lot of them are lawyers, engineers, or what their parents sent them over here and pay for them to go to school to become. So that's what I was saying. They would say, look at your counterparts. They're not doing the same things. And that was the rhetoric they were saying. I wasn't saying that they came over here.
But that talking point, that's what I'm saying.
That's not what I said.
that specific talking point that you're saying is not true. Y'all not coming over here just balling out of control and just doing better. Y'all are actually, I was like, a lot of y'all are just basing off of that small percentage. Y'all not taking your riffraff with y'all. Y'all not taking y'all gangsters, y'all thugs, and y'all shooters that.
And I just wasn't understanding the argument here, because that's not what I never said.
So what he's saying is like, okay, so a lot of people will be like, you know, black excellence, we're doctors and things of that sort, and you guys will you will big that up, but then when a Nigerian man commits a crime, it's, you know, black men killed 5 children, and they're not saying the ethnic group. So like, y'all don't talk about
all countries do that in
We
sports.
do,
When
No,
African,
but the problem is that
in France, when
it
that
gets-
guy
it gets put
rescued that
on.
girl off that building,
So
he was a French
ethnically,
citizen, but before he rescued that person, he was an African. All
no,
countries do
no.
that
It
to
happens.
immigrants.
It happens
You're an
a lot
immigrant
more
when you do
here.
something bad, and you're a citizen of that country when you do something good. That's not a black people thing. That's
No,
a
because the problem is
global thing.
what Rashad is trying to say is the problem is we identify ethnically. Ethnically, we're black. Like black is an ethnicity for us. It's not just a race like it is for Caribbeans and Africans. Your ethnicity in I'm gonna say in an African country, maybe your tribe, right? And maybe then where you're from, and then your ethnicity in a Caribbean country may just be the country's name. But in the United States, black is an ethnicity for us. So what Rashad is trying to say is that often you all will, you know, be very proudful about the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers, and that's great. We're proud of them too. But then when you have mass murders or mass crimes by black immigrant groups, you all point to black Americans as the murderers and the people who do all those crimes, and you don't talk
That's
about
because
your
that's
own.
how the media portrays it.
No, we can't do the media game because
I
y'all
rarely see a murder and they be like, the Nigerian man killed a white woman.
Because when y'all do something successful, when y'all do something successful, y'all specifically,
trust me, they will make sure they highlight that he is Nigerian American. Or
when y'all do something, I'm talking about when y'all do something specifically successful, y'all make sure to separate yourself. Y'all will say exactly. Hold on. When
they say black.
When no. When Usain, like when Usain Bolt was winning them awards, I can't remember those sisters who was winning those awards. Y'all was throwing up every Jamaican flag that y'all can find. Y'all was saying, yeah, that's how we do it in the islands. When you Rihanna wins her awards, y'all rep on Rihanna. But then when it comes to the crime, y'all make sure to say, hey, that's not us. We don't claim them, and that get thrown on our names. Y'all that get thrown on black society. So
okay, I'm gonna move on from that. I'm gonna move on from that because we can talk about that for a long time. But what I want to add to that is that I want to add to Ashley's point about the Haitians. Honestly, growing up, the Caribbeans were the ones to downplay Haitian culture. I never heard, honestly, in my experience, Black Americans diss Haitians because we weren't that familiar with Haitian culture and why it was different than Jamaican culture. Black Americans at one point were like kind of ignorant. Everybody was Jamaican. Like we was just like, what? We didn't know the difference. And I'm speaking from my mother's side of the family. So growing up, in my perspective in New York, the Caribbeans would make fun of the Haitians. And so I find that very interesting when, you know, someone says, you know, we're closer to Caribbeans than y'all, but then it's like within your own Caribbean culture, there's a bottom caste, which it's in my opinion, it seems to be like at one point was the Haitians. Like Caribbeans will make fun of the Haitians, which is ironic because they're the only country who have gotten their freedom on their own, outside of the only full Black country is what I'll say. But I also want to just move on just because it's an hour in and I don't want to take up too much of y'all time tonight.
Take it up.
So I think we touched on a lot. So I'm going to move on to the next question I have, which is, are Euro Americans more accepting of Africans and Caribbeans? And if they are, why do you think so? Because Emmanuel Ako, right? He said that his Nigerian background frees him from the sting that Black Americans have due to slavery. And that's paraphrased. So do you feel like your interactions, I guess Ashley, William, and Raina, do you feel like your interactions are with white people are different because you're not Black American per se, but you're living in the United States?
I personally don't think so. I feel like until I say it, they don't know. They just think that I'm a Black person. So I don't feel like there's any way for me specifically that there's a difference. Most people just look at me as Black, so I don't have an accent. They don't know until I say it. So
Yeah, I would say this. I would say the same thing as well. For me, in my personal experience, there hasn't been a difference in how I've been treated by Euro Americans or white people, because a lot of the times I do not say what my ethnic groups are, right? So I'm just perceived as an African American. I'm just perceived as a Black person living in America. So I face racism the same way as most as African Americans have. But I do know that it is true what he's saying. What Emmanuel Cole. How you pronounce his last name? Achu?
I don't know. Yeah, I think
Oh.
I,
Yeah. So but what he is saying is true, because I have done research on it, and I don't know about for Africa, but I think it's the same practice amongst Africans as well. But and what some of you have said before is that when I'll say Black migrants, so that includes the Caribbean and continental Africans. When Black migrants do come to America, they do distance themselves from African Americans, and they do try to, as many other migrants of color do as well, everyone tries to assert their proximity to whiteness. Everyone tries to assert their proximity to white Americans, and Black migrants have done that as well in the Caribbean, and African migrants and Caribbean. Yeah, African migrants and Caribbean migrants have done that, where they have distanced themselves from Black Americans, because they know that if they try to fixate, if they try to conglomerate themselves with Black Americans, that they will be punished by the system of white supremacy in America. They know that, yeah, and then after white Americans have treated migrants better than African Americans because of that. So giving them the job opportunity over the African American, because they know that the Black migrant isn't going to speak about race on the job, isn't going to go against injustice on the job, because like
they're
that.
just trying to survive.
Right, and then that whole
Right.
conversation about race, and that kind of activism, around that kind of radical activism around race, usually comes from Black Americans. So white Americans, they usually like Black migrants a lot better, for jobs and for everything else, because they know that those Black people are not going to challenge race in America in the ways that a Black American would.
mhm. Yeah, I definitely can see that too. And I also think the independence of each other's countries separates us from the race conversation sometimes, because a lot of African countries and Caribbean countries got their independence in like the 1960s. Meanwhile, we got emancipation in 1865, 100 years earlier. So we kind of are already privy to like the white systemic microaggressions in the workplace, and where our ancestors have taught us, when I say ancestors, I mean like literally like grandfathers have taught us to move and shake a different way than you all. So I think our survival tactics are just a bit different than Caribbeans and Africans, because we are a group of people who have been on this train of like freedom and reparations for a very long time. And a lot of us, and just speaking for myself, I can trace my enslaved ancestor 4 generations back. It's not far from me. And enslavement is not far from me. And I'm pretty sure it's not far from you all either. Well, the Caribbeans. But it seems like to me, at least from what I've seen in society, that you all do feel, some, not all, but some people feel better that they don't have the slavery history attached to their lineage. And if you all ever watched Power, there was one point where Tasha got pulled over by a cop, and she changed her accent and she was like, "No, I'm Trini," to the cops, and he let her go in the show Power. And so she kind of did that to show like, I'm not like the regular blacks, I guess. She basically changed her accent so the cop could let her go. And I think that you all experience the same racism, but I do think that whites do feel a little bit more, I don't want to say comfortable, but knowing that they don't have to deal with the history when they're meeting a Black American person with that lineage. Like your grandfather enslaved my grandfather. Is that serious when we're in front of white people? Because that's how it is, like literally for my family. So I move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say
Mhm.
that I have a story. So when I was in college, well, actually, so when my sister was in college, she went to Maryland, and she did like a whole science course or whatever, but she had a group project, and her last name is Jones, and that's a really common last name for Black people in America, Jones. But she also ran into a guy who is white who has the last name Jones, right? And so already that connotation of like, oh, your family might or may have owned my
Yes.
family at some point, right? There is that like
Ooh.
stigma of
Yes.
like, oh no, this is not how this is going to work, right? So you're already going to have that tension when you're in that group project with working with white people, Euro Americans. So when you go somewhere, so when they talk to Caribbeans or Africans, there is no real, well, they don't feel like there is a perceived tension. There's no stress when they have to worry about like, oh, I don't have to worry about slavery. I don't have to worry about that talk, because they also, some Caribbeans and Africans don't understand the like minutia, the small details of like things that are happening around you in a workplace. Like, things could, a boss could say something to you and you could be like, oh, that might be racist. Like I might say, oh, that might be racist, but they might not say that's racist. They might just say, oh, he was playing around, or whatever the case may be, because you didn't have to go through those years of striving and working and putting yourself or your family through that struggle, or just being placed in a constant state of struggle. So there is that like there is that that feeling of like, if you are of a different background, you do have you don't have to feel that sting of being an American or African American, because you know you have another culture to rely on, and just to say like, oh, that's not me, I'm not like them. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Moving on, would unity build social and economic power, and is it the right time to unite?
Um,
I
oh,
don't think so. Oh, but you go ahead.
oh no, y'all good. If one of y'all can go for it.
Like
Yeah.
in terms of economic unity, I mean, you have to ask how are you going to unite with people who, or just different countries who are still under the economic shadow of things like the Francophone banking system and the British Commonwealth. Because even financially, most of these Caribbean countries and African countries, they're still not financially autonomous from their former European overlords. So even that conversation of economic independence, that's a far that's like a deep down the rabbit hole type of conversation.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think, like I said, because there's that 100 years apart, it contributes to that difference. And then also, you still have other countries colonizing these Black countries as we speak. Like China's taking over a lot of African countries, a lot of Caribbean countries. You got the Indians and the Chinese telling Jamaicans that they can't build their own hotels in their own land. You got Chinese people going live on TikTok saying that there's no one race in Jamaica. So on top of the colonization that happened years ago, it's happening all over again. So it's kind of hard to like build within the diaspora. Um, so I agree with that. I feel like we should
I
stick to our nations and build in our nations.
um Okay, no shade. Like, I'm not taking anything personal. Like, we're on here to debate and everything. But I honestly feel like, um, people don't want to end white supremacy. They just want to be in that position. They don't really want to end what's happening. They just want to be the one that's in control. And like earlier, like when you were like people with like having fake hair, we want to be somebody else. Like I kind of took it like as a little shot. Maybe it wasn't meant to be a shot, but I just know me as like how I put myself together. I'm always judged like, on my appearance. But like I said, I went to Howard. Like I've my experiences, like I lived in Thailand. I went to high school in Germany. I've been to Australia for Christmas break. Like I have had experiences that the average person hasn't. So like maybe I can't like shoot off quotes like you guys can and like name black activists and everything, but I have different experiences. And like how it says build unity and social, I feel like people don't always want to come together. They just want to be in that white supremacy spot. And so I feel like there will always be like a elitist class. There's a class system no matter what, no matter who's in charge. There's always going to be people who just, yeah, they want to be in power and look down on everyone else, or they want to feel like they're above other people. They're and more important, like look what's going on right now in a lot of African countries is like a lot of corruption where there are black people in power and it's still not working out because of greed and whatever else may have you. I remember one time there was a joke. Like I'm really into social media and pop culture, and like it sounds crazy when I say it, but I can identify with Cardi B because the way she presents herself, you wouldn't think she's smart, but when you watch her interview, she's a very smart woman. And not everyone can relate to Oprah. Not everyone can relate to Michelle Obama, but a lot of people can relate to Cardi B. And that's how I feel in the black community. Like everyone can relate to the stereotypical intellectual kind of person, but they can relate to me. And so when they talk to me, I can teach them things that they probably wouldn't get from someone else who doesn't look like them or talk like them or into the same things as them. So I feel like there was a joke on TikTok where people were saying like, what would it look like if black people came together and were doing well and prospering everything? And it was like, it would look like Atlanta. Like that's what's happening in Atlanta. A lot of people have money. They like have black owned businesses. They're coming up, but it's still like some kind of craziness that's going on. It's just something that's just not quite right going
So
like with
I agree with you
Atlanta.
on that point. I feel like there was a comment I made on Twitter a while ago where I feel like there's a fight to be the best nigga. Like it's this
Right.
ethnic group. I want to be the best nigga. No, Nigerians, we are the best niggas. Like I feel like there's a fight to have the spotlight next to white supremacy. But what I will say is that to answer your question, what it looks like, what if we were to come together, what it looks like is Tulsa, Oklahoma. What it looks like is all the towns we've built before. And I think that we can come together, but I think that it's hard when you got people on the continent that's not even together. I mean, you got Nigerians and South Africans burning each other alive. Like that's I don't think I can step in and be like, come together, y'all. Like I don't think I can do that for them. And I don't think, but I think I can do that with Black Americans. And even though that my parents are both from different countries, my mom is Black American, my dad is Jamaican. I grew up with my Black American family, and I do see the difference in wanting to come together. I mean, like I think my Jamaican family, when they talk about Black Americans in a bad way to this day, and I don't understand it because my grandmother talks about how this Black American man helped her buy all her property. And so in Crown Heights in Weeksville, where I'm from, where a Black man literally bought the real estate. So it's like, I don't know. I agree with you where it feels like everyone wants to be the best and they want to be on top. And they want to maintain in a system of white supremacy, but I don't think they want to do that subconsciously. I think that's the unconscious thought. It's kind of like, oh, we're kind of comfortable. We have a little taste of money. We got social media. We got a little cars, a little houses. We're okay. I feel like there is a mindset of like, we don't need to do too much. We're fine. And I think that mindset comes a little bit more from, I'm going to say it, Africans and Caribbeans. I think sometimes you guys come off as, oh, we're fine. We don't need to fight as hard as y'all. Y'all doing too much. And I think in our mindset is more so like, this is not freedom. This is slavery in another name, just like that book. I think that's the mindset of a lot of, and I won't say a lot of Black Americans, because there are a lot of coons out there who don't think like the average people in this room. So, I
I feel
mean,
like
regardless,
you can also look to it um, where people are always asking like, why are black people joining the police force? Like, why would you join the police force? And then you see like how they abuse their power. They always, a lot of their excuses like, oh, I want to go and change from the inside and do this that, and the third. But then you go and you see that a lot of them become police officers and do the same thing that their white counterparts do. So I feel like I said, it's like people want power. It's just it would have to be a whole like dismantling the system and reworking it in order for that to work, in my opinion.
Okay. All right.
I,
Cool. So,
I
are there
wanted to say something
any?
too.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you could go first.
I was gonna say I believe in 2023 unity is overrated for our people. I think we need to prioritize our nation, our people, and we need to take care of our house. I think one of our biggest problems as
Who do you
globally
mean when
as
you're
a
saying
people.
our? Like, what do you mean by we? Because I thought the unity was like between the diaspora. Who
Diaspora.
are you saying when you say we, or like what are you referring to?
I'm saying like I'm a foundational Black American. You said you're Jamaican.
Oh, so you think okay, so we should separate within
Yeah,
the
I think we already are separate.
okay.
That's what
So
I'm
you don't
saying. I'm
think
just
that
calling a
Okay.
spade. I'm
Okay.
just calling a spade a spade. And other European nations, I think their biggest thing is their own code. Ukraine and Russia hate each other. They're not unified, but they still the first thing they did when Russia bombed them, they said, "Let's get these Negroes out of here."
They keep
They're on code. They packed them Africans up. Y'all getting out here with the quickness. North Korea, South Korea hate each other. They can't even cross each other's lines. But they make sure the Negroes is in check. They're like, oh no, y'all ain't gonna do all that. Y'all ain't finna come over here with all that black talk. So I think that's what we need as a people, as a code, because we're not one big monolithic Negro. Y'all have a unique culture in Jamaica, a culture that I could never fathom or I have to respect. I respect that. We not the same. We are different. But the code is respecting. I'm never gonna do anything to undermine my Jamaican brother and sister, even if he hates me. I'm never gonna do that. Malcolm had a great audio recording when the FBI visited him after he had got kicked out the Nation of Islam, and they wanted to come talk to him and say, "Hey man, we need some information on Elijah Muhammad. We need some information on these black leaders. We know you don't like Martin Luther King. Give us some information on it. We'll take them down." He said, "I would never do that." That's the code we need at the end of the day. We don't have to like each other. We cannot like the jokes X, Y, and Z, but I think we just have to be on code like other European nations are. So people aren't able to play divide and conquer with us. We can fight it. We can fight with each other. Like we got a little saying: "I beat up my little brother, but nobody else better not touch my little brother." You see what I'm saying? I can beat him up, but nobody else better not beat up my little brother. And that's how we have to have that relationship, in my opinion.
And even going back to oh, I'm sorry, you got that, bro.
Yeah, but so I would have to disagree with Chase. Yeah, so I would have to disagree with Chase. I think that unity is the answer. I don't think that as a black community that we can practice the same tactics as predominantly white countries do. So what I like to say is that you can't use white tactics to achieve black goals, specifically because how white supremacy is of how expansive white supremacy is through European expansion things and things like that, right? How white supremacy has functioned to keep black people kind of at the bottom globally speaking, right? So I don't think that we can use white tactics to achieve black goals, and specifically when it comes to the black community, I think that a lot of us have internalized this, and this is what white supremacy has done, that we have internalized this divide and conquer type of tactic, believing that we can be divided but then still kind of have black people respected, and well, not respected, but that we can be successful as black people and still be divided. I don't think that is the way. Specifically, I don't think that it is plausible to try to divide black people amongst ethnic groups, because if you look at the history, and I'll just say black American history, if you look at black American history, and I'll speak on the West Indian part of it, West Indian Caribbean history is tied into Black American history, right? So if you look at how you brought Malcolm X, his mother's Grenadian. If you look at Marcus Garvey's Jamaican. If you look at Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black U.S. Congresswoman, her mother's from Barbados, and after her father's Guyanese. If you look at Kwame Ture, or some people know him as Stokely Carmichael or Star.
Carmichael.
Carmichael.
Michael, yeah, he's from Trinidad and Tobago, right? And he was prominent within the civil rights movement and the Pan-African movement. And he's the one who really coined, not coined the term, but he's the one who really brought up that whole notion of black power, right? So, and then how a lot of you mentioned Haiti. If you look at the Haitian Revolution is what inspired a lot of the I don't want to use the word slaves, but a lot of the revolts that enslaved Africa, a lot of revolts that enslaved African Americans had, because Haiti was the first Black republic in the world. So what I think that we should do is that we should kind of, as was said before by Patrice, I hope I pronounced your name right,
Patrice.
and my
Portraits.
Portrace and myself, is that
Oh,
I think that we all, I'm sorry, but I think that we all have work to do in decolonizing our minds and kind of looking at each other and saying, wait, let's come together on our similarities and fight white supremacy together. Because as a lot of you have said, us trying to be the best Negro, right, will never work, because that spot, that position that we're trying to attain is very fragile. And white supremacy will never allow you to truly have any kind of power underneath it, because you are still Black.
Well
Okay.
said.
I would say everybody who you mentioned, from Marcus Garvey, Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, how you put it, one thing
Mhm.
they all have in common was they seen that what we were doing over here, and they was like, we want to be a part of that. Like Marcus Garvey, he seen what Booker T. Washington was doing, and even when it goes back to it, Black Americans have always had that revolutionary energy. If you go back to the Seminole Wars and stuff like that, you always seeing Black folks out here putting in work. We've been having that energy, and then people would come over. We start seeing a lot of change. We start seeing a lot of revolution going in a lot of major things, whether it was on the continent, when they seeing what we're doing over here, is when Black Americans get on code. When foundational Black Americans get on code and we start doing things and people join in, that's where the change start coming in. The idea that everybody has to get together and we have to get together under one banner of Blackness, that's not going to work, because even back during the transatlantic slave trade, you had people who were classified as Black who were fine with the transatlantic slave trade. Like we said, the people of Dahomey, the Moors, they actually acknowledged America as its first, were the first people to acknowledge America as its own nation. But they also were giving America the pass when they was getting the slaves. They just said, if you capture anybody who's Moorish, just remember to let them go, because those are people. So that's where they start reclassifying everybody as Negro. But I say I say all that to say the idea of us going under the banner of Black, that won't work. I think Black Americans, for the most part, need to focus in on ourselves, because it's like, how am I going to go help you clean your house and I can't even clean my own house? So I got to make sure I fix fix my own home, fix my own people first, and then I can branch out and help everybody else.
But the problem too, and to respond to you, and another point that, and it reminded me of another point that Chase brought up, you trying to go under the banner of unity just amongst Black Americans, that wouldn't work either, right? Because you also, just like how we can point to how African people traded other African people, and that's what kind of created and kind of sent other Black people off, and they were prolific within the transatlantic slave trade. What about Black Americans who were okay with slavery? What about Black Americans? You do have Black Americans that were not
But
fighting against. You
that
do,
wasn't that wasn't the norm though. And then
yeah,
even with that,
but that's what I'm saying, right? So even in Africa, you have African nations that were prolific within the transatlantic slave trade, but most were not. So it wasn't the norm in Africa either. And that's what I'm saying. We all have critical work to do within our groups to rid ourselves of white supremacy.
the difference is you might have had one or two people here or there throughout Black American society that was fine with slavery. You had whole nations over in Africa that was participating in it. Like I said, with the Moors, or not participating.
I feel like the history of this can go deep.
And
So I don't want to go too deep into that.
yeah,
But
okay.
what I will say is that, dang, I forgot it. But yeah, I don't want to go too deep into like, why we can't get together because we weren't together before, because Africans sold us off. I do agree that one of my friends, he said, when it comes to coming together, you need 10%. So I do agree that, like, everybody's not going to come together. We cannot band together all Black Americans, but we can try. And I think that because of the cultural differences and the problems there are already, it is wise to focus on your lineage first and then your race. And so I think, yes, we're similar in race, but we need to focus on our ethnicity and big up our ethnicity and make sure our ethnicity is great. And I think that, like, it's hard when a lot of people are immigrating here. Like, people don't want to be in Nigeria. They want to come here. And I want to go to Nigeria and enjoy life there too. Just like y'all parents come here and y'all enjoy life, I want to go over there and have a home and have success over there too. So I feel like how am I going to get that if people keep leaving and coming here? We have to big up our nations one by one before we come together. And I think at the very least, coming together should be, like Chase said, in my opinion, codification. Like, we could have an argument right now, but I'm not going to let no white person talk to you the way that, we're talking. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
I think at the very least, that is the unity that I would expect. But in terms of economic and social, I think we have to focus on lineage because, like I said, there's not one Black nation that I would feel safe in outside of the United States because of the mass migration to the United States. And it's like, how do we build up our homes outside of this country when people keep coming here? It's just, and I understand why people come here, but I think if we keep trying to build it's like over 50 countries in the continent, and there's over plenty of countries in the Caribbean. How can we all just hold hands when we got problems within? It's just very hard.
And just to finish off my thought, even when it comes to unity, in my opinion, I feel like Black Americans are the most unified people on the planet right now because of the simple fact. I'm right now in Georgia. I can go to New York, and I'm pretty sure I got family down there in New York. I go to California, I got family down there, and then I got family down in Baltimore. It doesn't matter. I got family connected like that because we're all connected somehow like that. Even just our culture in general, not taking shots at anybody else's culture, but even in our culture in general, we have that somewhat of a Southern hospitality, even when you go up north, because it's ingrained into us. A lot of Black Americans have it where if you come over there, it's like, okay, you can come vibe with me. Even when I came up here, a lot of people didn't know me, but they still embraced me like I was family. So the idea of the unity, I think that's normal amongst Black Americans. So that would be good to unify with.
Yeah, and that's a good point because somebody said a little while in the comments that, like, we're one ethnic tribe here. No matter what state you go to, we're one ethnic tribe here. We might have differences in money, and we might have differences in maybe like party, Republican or Democrat, but we're one. We really don't. We believe that there are two wings of the same bird at the end of the day. We're one ethnic tribe here, but in the content on the continent, there's multiple tribes. There's ethnic genocides amongst the tribes over there. You have just ethnic wars over there, and I think that causes a lot of strain on unity. So I'm going to conclude the conversation, but I will allow everyone to have some last words on what do we need to do. And I asked this in the last debate, and I think I kind of answered it already. So what do we need to do in order to better our specific lineage or better our communication amongst each other? Is it something like we need to speak to our parents and say, hey, stop calling these people akatas? Or do we need to, speak to our parents and say, hey, these people have amazing history. They're not just drug dealers and I don't know what your parents call us. Or is it something like, hey, we need to, I don't know. I just want to know from you all, what do you think we need to do? What should every group focus on to better their specific lineage and diaspora connection? And any last thoughts or words?
I agree with you. As far
Playing
as
back on what
like,
you mentioned, I think.
Oops. Sorry, Gareth. Go ahead, Ashley, and then Gareth, you can go next.
No, I was just saying I agree with
No, it's
you.
okay. It's okay.
When you were referring to like correcting our parents and everything, I know that's a journey that I'm on currently. Like I can admit my mom's Jamaican. I'm first generation American, so she does like separate herself and say those people, and she uses those terms sometimes. But I do correct her, and I feel like it just starts at home. Um, it is really hard because Jamaican people just in general can be a really like tough and stuck in their ways. Um, like we have this whole emotional like we lack emotional intelligence thing, so it's kind of like they can't really empathize or put themselves in Black Americans' shoes sometimes because it's just like I'm Jamaican, that's all they can see. But yeah, I just try my best because like you talk about my friends at the end of the day, like you're talking about people that I care about, people that I know and that I've grown to love. So it's just like, Ma, you can't say that, like that's not right. This, that, and the third. I try to tell her that. And anyone that I come across, I do have a lot of Black American friends who who talk bad about other ethnicities, and it might not be my ethnicity, but it's still like, girl, like, do you hear yourself right now? Like, do you hear what you just said? So, yeah, constructive criticism and correcting out of love is what I think could be a step in the right direction.
Okay, cool. And then before we move on from you, have you ever heard the term like Black Americans don't have culture? Does your family say that? Would you correct them and be like, no, they have culture? Do you think we have culture?
Um, I feel like they don't ever necessarily outright say culture, but I know when it comes to just your upbringing and like your manners and like when it comes to like cultural differences like that, as far as like hygiene and like how we cook and like different things like that, they may say like Americans don't have home training, or that they said they lack things culturally that a lot of Caribbean and African cultures do have. So I could say they'll say that, but I mean, I feel like they put together two and two, like black people in hip hop or black people in like rappers, or like the stereotypical black American things. They put those two and two things together. So I can't say that they don't think you guys have culture. They just don't like it per se, you know?
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Garrett. Any last words? What should every group focus on right now?
Yeah, I'm gonna just say something really simple, like for example, in the Quran, Allah says, "Verily, Allah doesn't change what's within any people unless until they change what's within themselves." So each of us as people, individually and collectively, if we want better, we have to learn how to do better, and we have to show how to do better. It has to be an inward and outward process. And then also, what you mentioned about just like the language, the words that we use, words have power because words have meaning. One of the things that each of us individually and collectively we should stop doing is we should stop freely using white supremacist lingo. There's a lot of words, like for example, race. The concept of race is a white supremacist concept. So we who have faced the main brunt of white supremacy, we should stop using that term race to describe anyone. And that's just one example. And even in terms of culture, every human being has a culture. It doesn't matter whether it's an individual culture, family culture, societal culture. Every human being has a culture. So anytime someone says, "Oh, well, this group of people don't have a culture," or "that group of people don't have a culture," you're literally chipping away at a person's humanity, because every human being has a culture.
Okay, thank you for that. Um, Raina, any ideas on what every group should focus on?
I'm still thinking.
Okay. Anyone want to just jump in, Rashad?
Yeah, I'll say
I would like to
something.
say something.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. You got it, sister.
Okay. I want to say that Black people are not a monolith. My grandmother says this all the time, but in order for people to come together, we all have to have a specific focus, and sometimes it's not going to overlap. It's not going to always be the same. Sometimes you might have to take a step back and just wait it out for things to actually happen. And a lot of the problems that we face at the end of the day, it has to do with capitalism and elitism and white supremacy. And so in order for us to unite and to like really realize our full potential, we have to realize that each of us, all Black people in general, we're all at the bottom of the boat. We're all at the bottom. Like there is no, we're not rising any higher than where we are. We're all in like crabs in a barrel, and it's just we're not going anywhere unless we actually decide to move and to unite. At the end of the day, it's
Okay. Please.
I was gonna say, as a foundational Black American, I think we have to go back to an old school mindset of we all we got, we all we need. And of course, that's gonna be offensive to some people, but that's the mindset we have to go back to. When we were building Black Wall Streets, we weren't depending on white folks. We knew they weren't rocking with us. And even though we were fighting for our brothers and sisters overseas to get over here, we still weren't necessarily dependent on them. You see what I'm saying? We were dependent on ourselves and our culture and our reliance and our codification as a lineage. And I think that's the key we have to go back to. And I think it's based off three categories: knowledge of self. We have to get knowledge of self. And I'm speaking specifically about foundational Black Americans. but this can apply to any group. You have to get knowledge of self about your people and the land that you're on. I hear a lot of people tell foundational Black Americans all the time, well, you're away from home. No, I am home. There is no United States if my ancestors didn't build the United States. I am home. We were here way before the white man brought us here. This is my home. I don't know anybody, not disrespectfully, I don't know anybody from the continent of Africa. My mama and father's from Mississippi. They my brothers and fathers were from Mississippi. And it goes back to Mississippi until we don't know the name anymore. You see what I'm saying? We are home. This is my home. And I don't think we have to flee anywhere. I don't think I have to flee to a continent. You see what I'm saying? Wherever the Chinese man goes, he goes to Jamaica. He says he is Jamaican now. That's his mindset. I am Jamaican now. I don't have to go back to China. We have to get back to that same mindset so we'll begin to build, and as well as get into the economic piece. Of course, once we have that knowledge of self, banking Black, buying Black, keeping that dollar circulate, and last but not least, doing one thing that our ancestors tried to do but never could do, and that's having a militant mindset. Not going with the popular mainstream narrative that peaceful protests or voting is the end all be all. We have to become militant. If somebody's touching our women, we have to be willing to die about that, not vote about it. You see what I'm saying? Not vote about it, do nothing. Like, we got to be willing to die about that. And all of these three things, the glue that sticks them together is the code. So regardless, even though I'm focusing on my foundational Black American family, if I see any of these sisters in the room, the sister from Jamaica, the sister from Africa, if I see a white man or any man putting their hands on them, I'm willing to die about that because I'm on code like that. So even though we didn't agree right here in this conversation, even though they Jamaican or they African, no, I'm on code and I'm gonna defend my sister. You see what I'm saying? And that's how we were as foundational Black Americans. So when the Italian fascists, they were over there bombing Ethiopia, you had foundational Black American brothers over there flying planes. No, we ain't gonna do all that, even though we have differences. So I think that's what we have to get back to, and I think that would be a great strategy to implement in any country among any nation of people, to focus on home and then be on code without.
Yeah,
I think you guys, everyone touched on really important points. And I agree with every single one person, so I'm going to keep mine really short. I just think education, just educating ourselves, respecting our differences, and embracing our similarities. Once you have respect for somebody, everything flows. So that's what I would say. Or that's something that I would implement. And also having these conversations, they're uncomfortable, but they're much needed, because I learned a lot from every single one of you on Black history that I personally didn't know on my own. I wish I could have brought you guys with more knowledge from what I learned back in Africa, but that's fine. But it was really refreshing to get some of these facts from here today. And I've always, even moving forward, I always think that we're all the same. We're all humans, one united, and I still embrace the aspect of uniting as a whole as Black people. But I also do agree with focusing on your lineage and building that up, because just like Africans do, they send money back home. We're trying to get out of colonialism that we're going through right now, so we send money back home to build that up. You don't see us spending, like, yeah, we pay our taxes here, but you don't see us building houses in America. So I do 100% agree on building your own personal community up, and then following, like you said, the code to protecting someone, your brother, when you see them in distress, or collabing with them when in need, type of thing. So that's what I would say.
I would agree, especially when it comes, or what Chase said, especially when it comes to acknowledging our lineage and focusing in on it. We don't have to look back to Africa for our greatness. We can understand that it was only 3% that was brought over, and then a lot of the Black Americans Black folks was already here. A lot of us are Aboriginal to this land. Like, even when it comes to my grandma, I found out my grandma was, I think it was Creek, if I remember right. So a lot of us have that lineage here. So we got to understand that we don't have to look outward. We don't have to go to everybody else's house and be like, oh yeah, that looks good, to big ourselves up. We have to keep on thinking about what we've done here that was great. And once we build ourselves up, then we can take our show on the road.
What I will say is that I think that the code again is unity. I think that what Chase explained was unity. What I will say also is that you can't break down the master's home with his tools. So this type of xenophobia that ethnic groups have amongst each other, I believe that it is part of the divide and conquer tactic, and just black people as a whole globally and in the United States of America. I think that that as long as we continue to fight amongst our ethnic groups, the white man gets to sit back and laugh. I definitely do believe that. And the thing about it too is that if we, again, going with like we have to educate ourselves about how white supremacy truly works. I think that a lot of people don't like we say white supremacy as a very general term, but we don't understand all the intricacies of white supremacy and exactly how it works on like a psychological level. And I think that we have to understand that, and believing that we are divided from another person that's the same color as us, um and us being divisive against that person. I think that those type of differences and us harping on that, that's what makes white supremacy work so well. That's what makes systemic racism work so well. That's what makes institutional racism work so well. Right? I think that each ethnic group, as I said before, has work to do to end the diaspora wars, because each group has contributed to the diaspora wars equally. And if you think that we haven't, I think that's the bias of you being within your own group. As a as someone who's from the Caribbean, I can understand how Caribbean, as I've said before, how Caribbean people have disrespected foundational African Americans, and how we need to have respect for foundational African Americans, because
Black.
they have laid the foundation, Black Americans, because they have laid the foundation for us to be here, right? And just one more thing too, like with us all coming here, we have to understand that's a part of white supremacy as well, because of how white supremacy has set up the core, which countries are the core and which countries are the peripheral countries, and how colonization has set up the economies in in places of the world. So I think that to understand the diaspora wars and why they have prevailed to the level that they have, we truly have to understand white supremacy in all its fronts, especially looking at it in a capitalistic lens, and looking at it from a racial lens as well. So we have a lot of it's just a lot of critical thinking that we have to do amongst ourselves, and just education.
Cool. Thank you. Patrice? And it's
Uh,
Patrice, not Patrice, William. It's Cortice.
Portraits.
Cortice.
um, I agree. I think we all have a lot of work to do. I don't think like I think all of us, all Black people, have something to contribute to each other, and we have. Um, we can't do the things we do without learning from each other and growing as people together. Uh, it is hard. I mean, yes, we should, uh, come together as our own small communities and groups, and then rise from that, and then come together later on. But I do think eventually we do have to come together, because if we don't, that's how white supremacy works. It's a divide and conquer tactic. It does not care whether we are Caribbean, African, uh, Afro Latino. Like, it does not matter. It really, like, we're all, at the end of the day, we're all Black, and so whether we like it or not, if we don't come together, we're all just going to crumble. It's
Okay.
a house of cards.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, we definitely went on a really long time. I appreciate everyone's thoughts.
Mhm.
I'll end it with, I feel like Black Americans are the conductors on the freedom train. I'm going to be honest. I think that Black Americans set the trend, and I feel like when it comes to unity, um, I think that I don't think that we've equally just contributed to the beef or the wars. I think that we participate in it now, but I absolutely think that Africans and Caribbeans have come over with disdain for whatever white supremacist reason, and then we've reacted to it. I will agree that the reactions are a bit much, and I think that they distract us from the freedom ride and things that we have to get done. And I think that at the end of the day, a lot of African people have a tribalistic mindset. And I think you guys are used to fighting with each other. I think that's something that we're not used to unless we're poor. So we don't really fight with each other unless we're fighting for change and coins. And I think there's a difference, a difference because, you know, uh, we experience not only slavery, but then sharecropping, cotton picking, then different waves of systemic racism, housing and incarceration and drugs. And I'm not saying that any of you haven't experienced that in your home countries, but I think all of that has altered our mindset. And so for that reason, this idea that we have to unite is nice but it's a unicorn because we have a lot of problems to work through, a lot of decades of issues to work through. So I just overall feel like we should focus on our lineage and work within our lineage, but then again, just keep the code, respect each other's culture, don't call Southern food um, slave food, don't call Black people ghetto and lazy. And, and there are ignorant Black people who talk bad about Africans and things of that sort, but I think the difference is a lot of African and Caribbean people pass that on to their children and then their children's children. And they say things like, stay away from those, don't marry those people. Like we kind of don't have that mindset. So I think at the end of the day, we can be united if we respect each other's culture. I think it has to start with respect. And then I'll agree and say that it also has to be education. I feel like a lot of people will say, you guys don't do anything, you're lazy, but it's like, you do know that we invented a lot of things, right? You do know that there's a lot of reasons why there is, a home security system, a red light, green light, yellow light. That's not from a white person. A light bulb, right? So it's like these ideas that we're lazy and we don't have, home training. We have Southern mannerisms. We're very welcoming. I think the education needs to be widespread. On behalf of Black Americans, we've educated ourselves about the Caribbean and Africa a lot. So I think that also needs to be widespread with just respect. But I think I'm going to be honest here. The most of the war comes from those two ethnic groups, Africans and Caribbeans. And I think being bi-ethnic, I can say that because most of the beef have come from my Jamaican family, where my American family absolutely did not provoke them from trying to talk bad about them or anything like that. And so I think we reacted, and I'll take responsibility for reacting, but I don't think we started this. But I do want to end it. And so I'll just say that I do want to end it because I have a bigger fish to fry, and I don't think it's worth arguing with people who look like me. I just don't see it.
I would say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I really wish your speech was ended with some kind of unity. It's like there were a lot of points that could bring back a debate as opposed to stealing it, I think there were a lot of unnecessary things that were just thrown in there. Like the whole, I think we're starting things. I think we're the conduct of the trend. It's like
I think
the purpose
I
of
just
this
have to
debate
call
is
things for
to,
what they are, though.
and I know
That's
that
the
I know
thing.
it's your
Like,
opinion, but
I feel
just
like
wanna,
okay, so this is something that no one wants to say, in my opinion, and I feel like I just have to call things for what they are because
those were points that were
because
supposed to brought up during the debate.
I grew up around both ethnic groups, and I am a part of a Black American lineage. And I think from what I've seen to this day, and from growing up, there is a jealousy that Africans and Caribbeans come over with, and they put that on us, and we don't feel that way. And
That's a
so
lot
that's
of,
not, no,
it's
but
like,
listen, hold on,
what are
'cause
your
I'm
sources?
ending the
Like those are
show.
empty
And
claims.
so
You can't
what I want to say is
generalize a
that
group of people. Like, do you know how many
I'm
Africans
not gonna
are
play the
in America?
excuse me, I'm not gonna play the we all have to contribute, we all have to take blame, because like I said, we reacted. And I will say that Black Americans, the way in which we react is unnecessary sometimes, because you guys are family at the end of the day. So the way in which we react is a little obsessive and a little extra on Twitter, from what I see on Twitter. But what I will say is that we do not pass this disdain down to our children. That's where I think the unity is not going to happen if you guys keep passing this disdain down to your children. And so I'm going to blame who needs to be blamed. I'm not going to skip skip around and say, you know what, we all just to no, that's not what it is.
No one is passing anything down to children.
The problem
you do realize
is
that a lot of us here
no,
are first
this
generation,
is what
right?
we're not going to do, because I'm going to end the show. So the problem, I'm going to call it for what it is. I'm going to call it for what it is.
And I'm a little
problem,
bit disappointed.
The problem
I wish you could end it by
at
stealing
large,
the D as
the
opposed to
problem
pointing
at
fingers.
large,
You did a lot of pointing fingers.
The problem at large is the mindset of a lot of Africans.
A mindset of yours.
And the tribalism.
Because
we don't
have
have
divided,
that
your
tribalism.
mindset is divided.
We don't have that tribalism. And I'll end it there. Like, I think that, you know, I could bring you back to stream if you don't interrupt me. But the problem is, in my opinion, it starts with this disdain that we don't naturally have. And you can tell me your experience, and I hear it from so many different people, and I understand it. And like I said, I'll take fault in participating in the diaspora wars and saying, and I haven't, you know, I'll take fault for my people for participating in the diaspora wars, because I do see the problem with the extraness, right, on Twitter. But what I will say is that when you think about where this comes from, I don't think it came from Black Americans. I'm not going to blame Black Americans for this war. I think it came from Africans and Caribbeans, and I'm blaming you all for starting it, and I'm blaming us for continuing it. And what I said is, I would like for it to end. I would like for it to end. I think we end with codification. I think we end with educating our people, our parents, that we are not lazy. We are not ghetto. We are not, you know, this low-mannered people. We are great people, and you are great people, and we should be great together. So that's what I'm saying to end the conversation. I don't see how that could be, you want me to blame everybody, but I don't think it's everybody's fault.
I think we all. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to say, I said what I was trying to paint was, I think everybody contributed to the division that we're in right now. That was what I was trying to head at.
I hear you.
It's like a lot of pointing fingers. It's like, how are we ever going to move past that?
No, we're moving past it. So here's the thing, though. We're moving past it, because this is part 2, right? We had a part 1. We're moving past this by saying what ethnic group has started this, and how are we going to move forward? And I don't think we can sit here and just say all of us started this. I don't think so. That's what I'm ending with. That's my opinion. I don't think we can blame every ethnic group for starting a diaspora war, because like we've pointed out, and if you do the history, Black people have commended and bigged up Africa since the 50s, the 40s. Like, we can go back, like, for 20s, the 1920s. Like, Black people in America have bigged up Africa, and we have not gotten the same love. We have not gotten the same respect, and it hurts. It hurts us. And so I'm not going to sit here and say Black Americans are to blame for this diaspora war. I think it's y'all.
And another African will probably say, "Oh, I beg to differ." That's why I was saying that instead of.
And it's beneficial for them to say that, right? But at the end of the day, I think I'm just being real. I think it's y'all, and like I said, I'm being the bigger person, being that Black Americans are the leaders of the freedom train. We're gonna end it. I'm gonna end it here. I can't end it for everybody in the world, but I'm gonna end it. I'm sorry that it started, but I'm gonna end it. And I think at the end of the day, just focus on your lineage, respect each other. Teach your family history, right? And how we operate, and we can move as a family. We can move as cousins. But until you can respect the culture, we really can't move past where we are.
Can we say that the Caribbean, the African groups too, needs to be respected as well?
Yes, we can say that for sure. We can definitely say that the African groups and the Caribbean groups definitely need to be respected, right? We know a lot about your history. I'll say that. So we know the greatness of you guys. We can learn more. And definitely.
All right. I just want to say thank you for having this conversation. They're very uncomfortable conversations, but we need to have conversations like this in order to get to a better place. So I just want to say thank you for holding this debate with everybody else that was here, and thank you. And from me to everybody, thank you so much for educating me today as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was a long 2 hours.
That was a little intense just now. I was like, oh.
Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month, y'all.
and enjoy the rest of your night.
All right.
Thanks. You
Bye.
too.
All right,
Bye.
bye everyone.
Bye.
Okay, all right. A very long 2 hours of a debate. And I really do feel like this is the last one I'm going to have, the last conversation I'm going to have. Because it's just a lot. And I just want to go over the comments because you guys are pretty active tonight. But I just want to answer some of the comments before I end the broadcast because last time I did not address the comments. So just starting from the beginning, I saw a little bit of a lot in the comments. So somebody said if it wasn't for them slaves and let me just put it up there. If it wasn't for them slaves, what and how would you come to the US to get your money up? Because I don't see it being an option in your countries. And I mean, I feel like that's like a big point, right? That sometimes we can't all get to. I feel like, you know, a lot of people don't appreciate how their parents were able to build wealth through migration and through Black Americans' plight. Like, if you really think about it, the minute your family would have stepped over here, they would have been lynched for the color of their skin. So why are they able to just succeed and become successful? Well, it's because of Black Americans. And I really feel like that's not said enough. You know, my grandmother, she told me a story about how a Black American man helped her buy all of her houses in Crown Heights. And I said that during the broadcast, but I feel like that's something that a lot of Black Americans don't get. And she got that help just for being an immigrant into this country and, you know, seeking help, and a Black American man helped her. So I feel like that's something that we have to be honest about. Somebody said the African kings were partners with the Portuguese in the slave trade. The last slave ship delivered slaves to Alabama, Clotilda. Only 3,000 people came here. The Portuguese had territories. Absolutely. And I think when we talk about unity, I feel like that stain of knowing that like our cousins have sold us off, it hurts our feelings. And I feel like people don't acknowledge that, and they just want us to get past that. But we're not that far removed from slavery. We're only about 250 years removed from slavery. So I feel like that is what hurts us. And people need to acknowledge that these descendants are still walking around. And so when you try to like undermine their culture and history, it's kind of like a lot. And then FBA leaders like Booker T advocated for Black immigrants. Yeah, like I really do feel like I love my people as a whole, and I don't want no smoke with my people as long as they don't want smoke with me. But we have to be honest about where the xenophobia comes from. You know how like when it's somebody else's fault, they'll be like, no, let's blame everybody. But it's like, no, it's your fault. You know what I mean? So I think we have to be honest about that. Ma'am, there are literally hundreds of videos of YouTube of us going to Africa, building it up, make it make sense. I gotta watch some of those. You got those what? All Africans. Okay, just a lot of one-sided comments. Okay, all Africans in Africa don't accept Black Americans. We have done more for the Caribbean and Africans, yet they have never done anything for us. Africans are tribal. They don't unify with each other. That was the point I was trying to make at the end. I was feeling like, you know, we just have to point it out for like, who's to blame for like the problems. And I think the tribalism that Africans have makes it very hard to unify because I think historically they're used to fighting with people who look just like them. Historically, we are not used to that. We are used to literally seeing a Black boy, a Black girl stranded in the woods and saying, you coming with us, not what tribe are you from? You can't come with us. So I think that is something that stops the unity. But like I said, you know, codification, that's my sister, that's my brother, that's my cousin. But you still need to respect the culture. And the only way for us to unify is for us to remain on code with each other. I think so. We foundation of Black Americans lay the foundation, especially for Black immigrants. I think we do. And I think people don't talk about how much we really had to already know about y'all and your nations for our ancestors to advocate for y'all to come here. That 1965 bill was not passed with eyes closed. Like, people had to be hosed down. People had to be sticked on by dogs. We talking about people's houses burned to the ground, Black American houses burned to the ground, so we can get that 1965 Immigration Act, so we can get Black immigrants to come over here. I just feel like we cannot let that just slide. Like, that was 50 years ago, and that 50 years has impacted and changed a lot of y'all's family stories. So it's kind of hurtful when we kind of just get disrespected, because we really do. I think deep down, naturally, we have this love for people who look like us. Okay, it is one-sided. It is one-sided. Africans are guests and are being disrespectful. Somali against pan-Africanism. Aren't you African too? Okay. Let's see what else we have. Africans aren't mad at the whites, Koreans, Chinese, and Arabs who created those images. Yeah. I don't know if, I think what they're talking about is just stereotypes. And I would have to agree that, like, I think it's very obvious who's the problem, and we don't point that out more than we point out the war, the beef. Like, we know who orchestrates this image of different ethnic groups. Hispanics and Asians kill and beat up our people right here. 1 million Hispanics came through in Mexico in 2022. That's insane. 69 mil Hispanic, 30 mil Asians, and only 4 mil Black immigrants. We need each other. And that's what I agree about, because I feel like you guys don't understand the future of America and the United States. In a couple of years, this country will be predominantly Hispanic. And I will say white Hispanic, since we talked about Afro-Latinas during the conversation. In a couple of years, couple of decades, this country is going to be predominantly white Hispanic, if you ask me, just with the influx of Hispanics that come through the borders. And I feel like the racism that a lot of white Hispanics carry will trickle on to our diaspora. And if we don't figure out some type of codification ASAP and stand by it and teach our children this, and teach our children not to disown each other, but rather stick together, it's going to be a problem. Okay, there's a lot of comments. I'm trying to go through them. Somebody said Jamaicans are prejudiced as hell. I dated one and they sat around the table arguing whose island is better with other Caribbeans. Yeah, I would say that the Caribbean is very prideful about their countries. And growing up, there was an argument like, who's better, Jamaicans or Trinidadians or Bajans or blase. So you do have that talk amongst Caribbeans, and then naturally they talk about Black Americans. Like I said before, often, and when I would visit my dad's house, often the elderly people would sit around and talk in the kitchen, and they would literally just talk crap about my Black American lineage. They'd be like, oh, those people are so lazy, they don't want to work. But mind you, I have Jamaican cousins who don't want to work, who still live here, who still hanging off the backs of the women that they date, on public assistance. It's like they're not being real about the nature of survival. And I do think that a lot of different ethnic groups, not just Jamaicans, but Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, a lot of people are very prejudiced towards Black Americans. But Jamaicans are definitely, I can definitely say that like Jamaicans are definitely very prideful. And I think something I didn't mention during the broadcast is that I think the ones here are a little bit more prejudiced than the ones actually in their countries. I think like if we were to go to Jamaica and speak to the people in the country, they're not as prejudiced, which is so strange. I think the ones that are born here or the ones who immigrated here are a little bit more prejudiced than the ones that who live in their country for whatever reason. It's so strange. They like to talk about Nigerians struggling to cope because Nigerians making money and living in big houses. I think she's talking about Rashad's comment. What I will say is that as I work as a financial coach, and a lot of different ethnic groups are struggling the same way other Black people are struggling, but it's not emphasized. The emphasis is on their wins, and it kind of creates an illusion that Black Americans are struggling because of themselves and not because of white supremacy. And then other immigrant groups are soaring. And I think that was the point of Rashad's comment, where in fact, a small percentage of immigrant groups of all kinds are soaring. And that's because there's a smaller population here than any other ethnic group, like a Black American or a white person, whatever. So I think the main point is that no one's trying to say that like other immigrant groups are coping. We're not trying to cope by saying that other immigrant groups are struggling. We're just trying to say that like there's a huge emphasis on wins and not losses. And the reality is that I speak with people every day who are African, who are Caribbean, who are other ethnic groups who are struggling, Asians who are broke, struggling, and they don't talk about those people, but they'll talk about the Black broke struggling people a whole lot more. And it's a lot of us who are actually succeeding. But I kind of have no problem where people talk about Black broke struggling people because we need reparations, and there's a reason why there are a lot of Black broke struggling people in this country, and there's a lot of systemic waves that has hit us time and time again. You know, we stand up, we get hit again. And so I don't think there's like I don't think anyone needs to cope, like talk about your struggles so we can cope. We are, yeah, we're not those kind of people. I feel like Black Americans are not those kind of people. We don't need to do that. In the Caribbean, the diaspora who set up nice homes get robbed and killed. I heard about that too. You know, I heard about Jamaicans going back home and getting killed for having nice things. So it's like that by their own people. And I think that poverty, that Hunger Games, that Lord of the Flies mentality is what causes that. But I think at the end of the day, if we had codification, like how you go back home to Jamaica and the Black Jamaican person rob you, but they don't rob the white person. That's being off code. So I think that we have to have codification, you know. We have to have codification. We cannot be beefing amongst each other, but we also have to be very real about where the beef comes from and how we move on. So yeah. American culture is FBA culture, not just hip hop and playing the dozen. Stop listening to Black comedians on TV. Yeah, that's one part that really hurts me because I'm really proud of both my lineages, and I feel like the more I learn, the prouder I am. And I just want to share. I just want to share the knowledge. Somebody said, but Black immigrants aren't the bottom caste in America. And that's true. Black immigrants aren't. There's a statistics study that came out that said Black immigrants are making more than Black Americans. I have to find it. But I think that's for, I don't know if it was like done in one state. I can't remember. But if that is the case, you have to ask yourself why. And I think there's a lot of codification. Like y'all have like little, not just Black, not talking about immigrants at large. They have like little Italy or Chinatown and little codification things. And we don't have that. And so we have to spend our dollar with everyone else. And yeah, I have to find an article to really talk on that. I know it's a shock, but 90% of what y'all think is white culture was created by the US. You're going to learn that too. Yeah. I could agree with that. Black Americans are accepting we've given years and leeway, and now we are done. Once you cross us, we are done. It's time for Africa and the Caribbean to show change. FBA is unity where we are now. Yeah, I think that, you know, we've been very open arms, and it's very tiring when we get spat on. It's very hurtful. And like, we cannot continue to be, it's like the bus driver getting jumped. No. How the person leading the way to freedom is getting beat up. No. Train gonna stop, bus gonna stop, everybody get the fuck off. All the Black Americans stay on. That's the vibe. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like we cannot have that disdain. I don't like it. And like I said when we ended the broadcast, is I see it being done more to Black Americans. I just have to be honest. Like, when I really sit and look from a non-biased point, there's more disdain from the other ethnic groups in the diaspora than there is coming from Black Americans. If Black Americans has ever had any type of disdain for any ethnic group, is not generational. It is bare ignorance, you know? Like, it's hurtful, but it's bare ignorance. It's not something our parents taught us. And I think that's the difference that we're not acknowledging. My mom never said, don't you bring a Nigerian man home. She never told me that, right? But a lot of y'all know that y'all parents have told y'all that. There's the difference that we have to be honest about. There's something I didn't get to post because this conversation should just go on, and I feel like I'm not going to stop until I feel like I get every thought out tonight, because I'm done after today. Like, I'm tired. But there was this girl, she posted, Haitian dad says no dating Black Americans to his daughter. Well, so much for pan-Africanism. And it's like, yeah, like, what is that about? Why would Haitian dad say that? You know, we don't have that. We don't have that in our culture. It's so funny how I say we, because I side more with, like, because I live here and I was born here, and the culture is like, yeah, it's so funny how we say we. Africa has no Black History Month. I'm gonna skip over that. Caribbeans and Africans are entitled to FBA civil rights and programs. Yeah, like, we created a Civil Rights Act. We didn't even call it Black rights, and everybody benefits from it, you know? Gotta think about that too. Thank you, FBA, forever. That's spam. That's spam. I'm not posting. If you have a, okay, if you're Black but you got like a white person as your avatar, come on. I'm not gonna post to you. I don't know if that's a bot or a spam. Most Africans will never admit that they are wrong. They will attempt to hide what's going on that is negative and highlight the same thing in FBA when it exists in their culture and it's way worse. Oh, that's a great comment, because one thing I will say is that when I was dating a Nigerian guy and we sat down face to face, like in a private space, no YouTube live, no people around, he told me in private that he feels that Africans at large are jealous and they're very prideful, and they don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that their generational xenophobia affects us and how we treat them. And I thought it was just excellent. And I'm like, damn, I wish I could have got you on camera, because this is what everyone else needs to hear. Like, it's just not fair that, you know, like, when somebody's wrong, like if my child is wrong, I'm going to tell her, baby, you're wrong. No. I think it was both of us. No, you're wrong. And I feel like, yes, I'm wrong. Maybe she's wrong for retaliating, but you started this. I feel like we have to be honest about this. Like, we have to. And I wouldn't just say Africans. I would say also Caribbeans. But I will, yeah, same, Caribbeans as well. But what I will say, just my bias with Caribbeans is my New York upbringing, because in New York we did band together with Caribbeans, but Caribbeans do it too. just because you were born here doesn't give you control of Black American culture because your parents immigrated. Be respectful of our culture as we are of yours. Absolutely. I feel like we are very excited to get to know other cultures. And I feel like people that were born here automatically think they understand Black American culture once they know hip hop. And it's kind of very insulting. It's like, okay, you know a little bit of hip hop. You know how to talk Av like us. And you feel like you're in, but really and truly, you don't know the culture for what it is. You don't know the inventions that we've created. You don't know. I mean, like, we wouldn't even have a red light, green light, yellow light. Like, we wouldn't even have a toilet. We wouldn't even have a ring of home security system. We wouldn't even have an ironing board. We wouldn't even have an ice cream scoop. We wouldn't even have potato chips. Like, child, I could just go on. We wouldn't have a lot if it wasn't for Black American culture. We wouldn't have hip hop. We wouldn't have rock and roll. We wouldn't have jazz. We wouldn't have. Shoot, we didn't even talk about this. Because it's just the live could go on for hours. But a lot of other countries got influences with their music from us. Like, there's a lot of things that we have added to our culture, and it's like, as soon as you come here, your children are born here, now they're American, yes, but they aren't entirely understanding of the Black American culture. So it's like, it's just be respectful. So she not Jamaican now? I'm confused. I don't know if you're talking about me, but specifically my lineage is split. My mom my mom's lineage traces back to South Carolina and Alabama, and our lineage traces back. We were able to find at least 7, 8, and then my dad's lineage traces back to Jamaica, but he was born in New York, and I don't really know that side of the family, to be honest. So I discovered on Twitter that I'm bi-ethnic. FBA will not change. We will continue to show respect for all culture. That is the way. Yes. And I also want to say that, like, I genuinely have so much respect for every ethnic group there is amongst the diaspora. And I think most of us do. I don't just walk outside my house and be like, you're not, like, that's just not me. That's just not how I was raised. Like, oh, what's up? Where you from? Like, you know what I mean? So we really do respect all cultures. But specifically in the diaspora, we really do love and appreciate Caribbean and African cultures. So yeah. If Africans will sit and let Libya have slave cells in 2023, then what do you think they will do to help us? That's why I said, like, there's so much going on the continent that I just don't think that unity is realistic, because I can't go over there and say, hey guys, there's a cultural difference. There's a time difference, we're 100 years ahead on the Western side. It's like, in terms of emancipation and independence, and we're still technically not free. All right. Go debate a real FBA. I don't know what you mean by that. American citizen, not American. A computer processor, a mattress, a satellite. This is cute. You know what? You know what's funny? When I was on Twitter, a lot of people would question my lineage. And I feel like, it's interesting when people say she's not real FBA. Well, what do you mean by that? Because I could trace my family history to the United States, specifically to South Carolina, to Virginia. So what do you mean by that? If you're still here. And then you said, there's no diaspora. At one point I believed in that, but I don't believe in that anymore. Like, for a very short time. I didn't believe that there was a diaspora, but I do. Yeah. I mean, there's nobody that's going to ever, let me make this clear. There's nobody that's ever going to take away my American Negro, Black American FBA lineage. Like, you could feel whatever way you want about it, but my people are from the United States. And my people are also from Jamaica. And so my mother, all four of her grandparents are foundational Black Americans, American Negroes. My father, all of four of his grandparents are Jamaican. So, I mean, and I've actually traced all four of my mother's grandparents, Black Americans, families, and seven for all. My mom's mom, my mom's dad, my mom's dad, my mom's dad, mom, my mom's mom, my mom's mom, dad, like everybody. So, I mean, you can say what you want, but only the lineage is going to count at the end of the day. You can't question my lineage. So that's cute. Anyways, I am going to end on, the question was, is Pan-Africanism dead? I'm going to end on, while in spirit, it seems ideal. Pan-Africanism is one-sided. And I think we need to change the word from Pan-Africanism to codification, to diaspora codification. Yeah, we need to change it to that, Black diaspora codification, because that won't die if we teach our children, when you meet this other Black person, respect. When you meet that Caribbean, African, respect. Vice versa. When the African people meet Black people, Black American people, respect. We need to change the word from Pan-Africanism to Black diaspora codification. That's what we can have. Black diaspora codification. But we cannot, Pan-Africanism is dead. Pan-Africanism is dead, it's one-sided. Black diaspora codification, that is what I'm coining. That's what we need. Because at the end of the day, if we put that generational codification and we pass that down, that is power. That is Black power. That is power. And there's power in culture, clearly, right? Because we've made cultures go global. So there's power in culture. And thank you. You only need one parent and you did a wonderful job. I mean, thank you. I feel like people would never, if Malcolm X was alive, people would never question Malcolm X. So don't question me. And I always meet people who are also bi-ethnic, and their mother being the Caribbean or the African, and I find them to be different than me, my mom, and Malcolm X's mom was the Caribbean. His dad was the Black American, and look how on code he was. So I just think that is silly. Like, leave me alone. But Black codification is the new term. I don't think it needs to be Pan-Africanism. Black codification. Are you on code? Did you tell your children to stay away, or did you tell your children to make sure you respect? You know what I mean? So I'll end it with that. Whew, it's 11 o'clock. We started at 8:30 on the dot. That is 2 hours and a half. I'll end the broadcast with that. I'm pretty sure more conversations are going to come up. I had an amazing guest cast, very smart individuals, very passionate people. So I ended with that. Thank you all for joining tonight. What I will say is, so that we can create more content, be sure to follow us on Instagram, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitter, and support us on Patreon. Good night, everyone.